Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1325 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news that Venezuela is warning of an armed attack by U.S. forces very soon. Also, Pakistan's accused India of a covert attack through Afghanistan. And also, Putin is now threatening the use of new weapons against the United States. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments coming out of the Eastern Caribbean, as we have seen that the Venezuelans are now preparing physical defenses on the ground, on key highways, and also throughout the rest of the country, as they are continuing to state that war with the United States is imminent. This all came today as the United States of America's USSOUTHCOM Command, responsible for all U.S. forces within the Eastern Caribbean, has declared a new joint task force that's being created with the purpose of quote-unquote destroying and crushing the cartels. We are also continuing to see that more U.S. assets are moved into the area, including AC-130 gunships that are currently based out of Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, along with the United States of America supposedly requesting to base U.S. forces in Grenada, a small island near to the coastline of Venezuela and just about 50 miles away from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. We have also been able to hear additional information that the Republic of India and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan appear to be getting pretty close to going back to full blows, at least here in the very near future. As we are continuing to see airstrikes by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the Pakistani Prime Minister has stated that these very actions are being conducted against Afghanistan because India is supporting and assisting the Afghans in conducting an armed conflict against the Pakistanis, largely stating that the Indians are attempting to spur the Afghans into action by proxy and continue to deteriorate the Pakistani geopolitical situation, at least within the region. This is giving us a general indicator that the tensions may start to rise to a boiling point again, and this may be what actually is the justification for the erosion of the ceasefire along the line of contact in Jammu and Kashmir, and may lead to another significant border war inside of the subcontinent. While that's all been going on, we also were able to hear some fairly significant news out of the United States of America, as we are now hearing that the President of the United States has alleged that the People's Republic of China is attempting to try and monopolize its rare earth metal resources, as well as those of other countries, by requesting some foreign countries by letter to no longer export any rare earth metals, whether they're unrefined or refined, to the United States of America or any Western-led countries. As a result of this, the President, based off of that assumption, has now announced that 100% tariffs will be put onto effect in China here within the very near future, causing the stock market to crash here in the United States of America, losing about $1.2 trillion in market value over the course of the day since that announcement has been made. We have also been able to hear additional statements as well inside of the U.S. government about other developing situations, including efforts to rebuild the Middle East for the larger part, and also that the President of the United States is still going to be possibly holding a meeting with Xi Jinping to maybe see if this whole entire situation can be averted. Although we're not really sure if that even will happen at this point, the meeting is largely up in the air. Inside of Europe, we have been able to hear that another unidentified drone has been spotted flying over nuclear warning aircraft at a NATO airbase within western Germany, while inside of Belgium, the NATO General Secretary has stated that the Steadfast Noon NATO military exercise, a nuclear readiness exercise, is still on schedule to be conducted on the 13th of October, here within the next few days. We have also heard that the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to continue to hold their lines and inflict significant losses on the Russian Federation's armed forces over the course of the day. This comes as the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, has openly stated that the provision of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine is blackmail and posturing, and also, in response to that, the Russian Federation will be announcing a new array of nuclear weapons, which is quite interesting because that would be largely showing that they have not adhered to the START treaties, considering that the START treaties generally limit everyone from developing new and deadlier nuclear weapons. Nevertheless, we do have a huge and major amount of news to cover over the past 24 hours. And of course, we're going to be trying to get y'all through this insanely large and crazy amount of news as much as we can throughout the night, and as much detail as we can possibly provide. We'll be starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the course of the night. And of course, moving us into our first and most major story of the day, we are seeing that it does appear that both sides are viewing that war is inevitable within the Eastern Caribbean, as the Venezuelans are significantly fortifying key infrastructure inside the country, and the United States of America has also been observed moving new forces and equipment into the area, and also expanding our force basings. Inside of the area of the Caribbean, we have been able to hear that Nicolas Maduro's forces inside of Venezuela appear to be preparing roadblocks on major interstates and highways throughout Venezuela in preparation to try and eventually stop a U.S. invasion if it does happen. Hopefully this will load eventually, but in the meantime, what we are hearing from the Venezuelan Ministry of Defense is that it appears that some form of an invasion by the United States of America is actually imminent, at least to some extent, and for this reason they are starting to conduct actual invasion defense measures throughout the country to try and ensure that if the United States invades, they'll at least have some sort of a fighting chance to hold an area for maybe an additional 5 minutes longer than they would have. We were able to see pictures today, if it eventually loads, of roadblocks that were set up on the major highways. We're almost there, folks. We're almost there to setting this thing up. Any minute now, and there we are. There's the picture that we were able to see today of concrete hedgehogs that are being set up in large droves near to the area of a highway inside of Venezuela. From what we understand, this was near to the area of Caracas, and we can also see that an excavator and other additional special equipment has been brought in to be able to set up these roadblocks throughout the highway and pretty much close it off if necessary. This is not really a major defensive measure. This is one that, for the Venezuelans, is major, but in its actual effort to stop a U.S. advance, it would be quite minimal. As a matter of fact, this really wouldn't work, at least from what I would assume in theory. Let us go with a hypothetical scenario that the United States of America actually does conduct a successful amphibious landing, or actually make shorefall somewhere on the northern coast of Venezuela near to Caracas. If they advance down a highway, like the one that was seen, into the city of Caracas itself, these roadblocks would not really pose that much of an obstacle, at least for U.S. forces that are on their move into the capital of Caracas. If these hedgehogs are unprotected on the highway, and there generally is no suppressing fire being provided by the Venezuelan armed forces, that means that this is as simple as getting the Army Corps of Engineers up to the front, or the Seabees for the Navy, right up to the front, having them remove the hedgehogs, and then get the rest of the forces on through. That is pretty much as simple as it largely would be. So while the Venezuelans are they're using this as a pretty significant defensive measure. It would not really pose a significant defense, at least compared to the United States of America, and especially considering if their resistance does not hold up too well, which we're starting to expect that may be the case, that sort of a defense would erode away pretty quickly. We also were able to hear an additional statement today from the Venezuelans by Nicolas Maduro, stating that U.S. military action against the country is imminent. This also came as a rumor started to circle today that during recent secret negotiations with the current administration, the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro offered to open up all existing future oil and gold projects to American companies, give preferential contracts to American businesses, reverse the flow of Venezuelan oil exports from China to the United States, and slash the country's energy and mining contracts with China, Iran, and Russia. Apparently, at least according to the rumor, the U.S. government refused the deal and has now halted any further diplomatic negotiations with Venezuela. And that was according to
Honestly, that sounds unbelievable, actually. At least to me, in my personal opinion, I would be shocked if Maduro actually offered to get rid of all that, like the Chinese influence, the Iranian influence, the Russian influence, and also basically cut ties with them, essentially. That's a huge move right there. Me personally, I doubt the U.S. would reject that. If they actually offer that properly, I think they would actually be inclined to accept that, personally. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it sounds to me like I don't know, I'm a little on the fence about that claim.
I would have to be honest with y'all, this one is a little bit of a stretch. As far as the United States is concerned, all we're trying to do, at least from what we would understand, is avoid any sort of large Chinese influence within the region. If Venezuela is literally giving up any Chinese influence and completely turning itself towards America without a fight, at least according to this rumored proposal, the United States would most likely accept that flat out. There really wouldn't be a reason for us not to. We largely are achieving everything we would be looking for without us having to actually invade the country and forcefully overthrow the Maduro government to be able to achieve that. So I'm not really sure the validity of this exclusive report to the New York Times today. It seems like that would be a bit of a stretch. Maybe we did get this proposal and we shot it down, but at the same time, this would be seeming to fly in the face of any form of conventional wisdom to be given pretty much an unrefusable offer because it's so good, and then just shoot it down anyways and continue to move forward with military escalations, making it seem a little
And also at the end of the day, too, like I get the fact that Nicolas Maduro, he's gotten on the bad side of the U.S. leadership right now, and that's totally understandable. But at the same time, though, I really doubt that hatred of Maduro being the leader of Venezuela would be enough reason to follow through with an invasion if he offered something like that. Because if he offered that, that basically solves all of our problems all at once. We can leave Maduro in charge if he truly offered that and simply let him be the figurehead. But at the same time, he's being controlled by the United States, which would achieve our objectives without having to actually take military action, which most people would want to avoid, even if they disliked Maduro. So I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it's totally false, but I'm not saying it's totally true either. Somewhere it feels like there's some truth in between.
I have a feeling, I'll be honest with y'all, I have a feeling that the rumor is somewhat questionable, at least at this point, because if the United States is wanting to curb any sort of Chinese influence in the area, if Maduro is saying that he's going to just completely throw all of the BRICS countries out of Venezuela and just open up economic relations with the United States, that pretty much achieves everything that we would want, at least as far as a geopolitical position. I see some people in the chat trying to say that this is actually to deal with the cartels, but I do have to remind many people who are saying that about the actual difficulty of dealing with the cartels in just dealing with Venezuela. Let me ask y'all something. Where in the world have the most famous cartels come from? Most of y'all would not even say Venezuela. I'm sure many of y'all are answering that right now, and most of y'all would be coming up with answers like Colombia and Mexico, where most of the famous cartels and cartel leaders have come from. The cartel is an international organization, or at least cartels in general are international spanning organizations, and they do not exist solely within Venezuela. This is a lot like saying we're going to deal with a tumor by only cutting off a quarter of that tumor, and that'll completely destroy the tumor. And that sort of logic is what would be applied in saying that we're truly going down to Venezuela to fight the cartels. There really is no way to effectively crush or destroy the cartels by going into Venezuela alone, because the cartels strongly exist in Colombia, they strongly exist in other Central American countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Belize, Guatemala, and also Mexico, of course, as well. They exist throughout the entirety of Central and South America. And on top of that, another thing that we have to think about here is that unless if the United States military is willing to occupy Venezuela indefinitely, and then we pretty much start a country country hopping expedition where we just invade and hold down countries indefinitely until the cartel is dealt with, there really is no way to deal with them. Because if we invade Venezuela and quote unquote crush the cartel there, then we withdraw all U.S. forces. The cartels will naturally return because there's less of an enforcement presence there at that point, and then we move to Colombia, and then the whole thing just shifts right back over to Venezuela. That would generally be how that worked, or they would shift somewhere else, meaning that there really is no way, at least with military force, to actually fight and destroy the cartels, leading us to have to come up with a logical conclusion that the argument that we're actually trying to engage and destroy the cartels can actually be the real motive for us going down in dealing with Venezuela in this way. The real motive that we would have, and this is something we physically can alter through military presence, would be the Chinese economic influence inside of Venezuela. And that is why we generally on this channel do not even really give the cartel argument any real leeway, at least in our analysis, because it does not make sense when you view it outside of a vacuum when you're dealing with the whole of Central and South America and not Venezuela alone. So I would generally have to say that for that reason, if the Venezuelans offer to pretty much boot the Chinese out, why would we refuse that? And that's what's making me believe that that story might be a little bit of a stretch, to be entirely honest with y'all. And I'm not really sure if that was the exact offer. Maybe there's a little bit of truth in it, but I feel like the United States would be keen enough to accept that offer, because if I was the president, folks, and I was given that offer, and let me make sure to go back and reread to y'all the actual supposed terms of this offer. Open up all existing future oil and gold projects to American companies, give preferential contract to American businesses, reverse the flow of Venezuelan oil exports from China to the United States, and slash the country's energy and mining contracts with China, Iran, and Russia. That is a knockout deal. I mean, that literally is everything that we would ever want to achieve inside of Venezuela, rather than the deposition of Maduro. That's the only thing that this does not achieve. So if this deal was given, if I was the president, I would accept it. We've pretty much gotten 90% of what we want, except for the expulsion of Maduro. And that is a very advantageous sort of position to be in with an agreement like that. And that's why I'm generally saying that it seems a little bit dubious that we would shoot down such a proposition if it was even made. But beyond that, a lot of people are talking about whether or not the United States is going to attack very soon. And before we get on into that question, I do want to lay out the prevailing conditions in the Eastern Caribbean at the moment, outside of Venezuela internally, to give you all a little bit of a better picture to be able to answer that question. And so moving us on into the Eastern Caribbean as a whole, we were able to hear that a press release was given by SOUTHCOM today about a new joint task force that's going to be established for narcotics operations. And I'm going to read this to y'all word for word, bar for bar, because it is quite important for our force disposition in the area and also our objectives going on into the future. This is coming out of the headquarters in Miami, Florida. If y'all do not know, U.S. Southcom's headquarters is actually in Miami. But U.S. Southern Command announced the establishment of a new joint task force under the Marine Expeditionary Force, or 2 MEF, today to synchronize and augment counter-narcotics efforts across the Western Hemisphere. The JTF will integrate the expeditionary capabilities of 2 MEF with joint force and U.S. intelligence, interagency partners represented by the Homeland Security Task Force. Transnational criminal organizations threaten the security, prosperity, and health of our hemisphere, said Admiral Alvin Halsey, commander of U.S. Southcom. By forming a JTF around 2 MEF headquarters, we enhance our ability to detect, disrupt, and dismantle illicit trafficking networks faster and at a greater depth, together with our U.S. and partner nation counterparts. Key objectives of the new joint task force will include the following: identifying narcotics trafficking patterns to interdict illegal shipments of narcotics before they reach the United States and partner nation territories using intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, expanding real-time intelligence fusion among U.S. military, federal law enforcement, and partner nation agencies, conducting joint training to improve interoperability among U.S. military services and increase rapid response posture, and enhancing partner nation counter-narcotics operations capacity through advisory teams and combined operations. Our team is trained, equipped, and ready to lead this task force, said Lieutenant General Calvert Worth, commanding general of the 2 MEF and designated JTF commander. This is principally a maritime effort, and our team will leverage maritime patrols, aerial surveillance, precision interdictions, and intelligence sharing to counter illicit traffic, uphold the law, and ultimately better protect vulnerable communities here at home. The JTF will report directly to SOUTHCOM in Miami. Its creation underscores SOUTHCOM's commitment to a whole-of-government multinational approach to defeat and dismantle criminal networks that exploit our shared borders and maritime domains. Updates will be released as they become available. That's the statement by SOUTHCOM today. In the meantime, U.S. diplomats were working on trying to base U.S. forces in Grenada, at least according to some information we were able to get today, as the U.S. has asked the island of Grenada for permission to host military radar equipment and technical personnel at Maurice Bishop International Airport just off of Venezuela's coast. Grenada says it's carefully reviewing the request, citing national sovereignty, public safety, and economic interests. The island of Grenada is actually a fairly advantageous position for the United States to hold if we can get here by the allowance of the nation of Grenada. Grenada is a small nation, almost a city-state of a sort on the island of Grenada, here within the Eastern Caribbean. It is about 50 miles, I believe, from Trinidad and Tobago. It's actually more like 80, and we already understand that some U.S. Aviation elements of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment of the U.S. Army have already been spotted around the port of Spain in Trinidad and Tobago, heavily suggesting a U.S. military presence within that area. At the moment, the United States is trying to expand some limited military presence, at least to the Maurice Bishop International Airport on the very southern side of the island of Grenada. If this is successful, this means that the United States will generally have, to some extent, a coverage net of all Venezuelan naval and military operations, all the way from the very barrier islands of the Eastern Caribbean and all the way up to Puerto Rico, pretty much creating a semicircular detection grid that we would be able to generally observe and react to the Venezuelans from. We do not know if the Grenadians are going to accept that request or if they are going to actually allow U.S. forces within the area, but it does appear that U.S. diplomats are working on getting additional force basings for the United States conducted within that area. We've also been able to note near to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, the arrival of U.S. Air Force AC-130J Ghost Riders, aka the gunships. Many people know the AC-130Js. And one thing that I can tell y'all, and this is a very interesting note to point out, is that AC-130Js only operate in absolute air superiority scenarios. If there is any risk of ground fire at all, they will not operate an AC-130J. So this is showing one of two things with the deployment of these AC-130Js to Puerto Rico. One, we are either expecting to achieve air superiority over Venezuela if we conduct an attack on them, to the point that this AC-130J is able to operate efficiently directly over Venezuela in support of ground forces, or two, we are bringing in this AC-130 to use its AGM-114 Hellfires, which we can see mounted on the wing here, to be able to conduct attacks against additional narco vessels that would be spotted near to the Venezuelan coastline. In that situation, we would still achieve complete air superiority, and the AC-130J could be properly used. So in either direction, it is showing us that there will be some sort of a U.S. Air Force direct involvement at this point, which is also quite interesting, considering that all prior actions that have been conducted against narco boats seems to have been conducted by the United States Marine Corps' F-35s based out of Roosevelt Roads, or they were conducted by the United States Air Force's Reapers. We also, once again, want to remind you all of the force disposition that's currently within the area. This is our latest infographic that we've been able to get from Ian Ellis on Twitter. Massive shout out to him. He puts together amazing infographics on U.S. naval assets and forces around the world, and this infographic here is showing us once again the actual force disposition of the United States as it was last reported around the time of October 2nd, around a week ago. So it does appear that the U.S. forces within the area are quite significant. U.S. forces and their presence, at least around Venezuela, is rapidly expanding, and U.S. forces are basing at this point, especially because of the presence of the 160th SOAR yesterday, directly on the coastline of Venezuela largely. And this has led a lot of people to wonder, is the United States going to be attacking Venezuela soon, or is it not? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So it looks like 49% of the audience said the U.S. will attack very soon, like the Venezuelan leaders believe it's going to happen. And 21% said the U.S. will probably not attack Venezuela whatsoever. And 18% said the U.S. attack is probably weeks out. So right now, the Venezuelans are panicking. They are freaking out. That's very obvious right now. They're deploying the tank traps that we saw, which is obviously they believe an attack is imminent. But in my personal opinion, I think there's still preparations that must be taken by the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy before they can actually pull this off. And I think the proof of that is that we're currently still asking Grenada for permission to host radar equipment on their territory. So we wouldn't be launching an invasion without having all that in place already. So the fact we're hearing about that yesterday, which was October the 9th, and we're getting worried about it today, I would say the attack is probably still weeks out. Maybe, honestly, give it 2 more weeks. That might be how the attack's going to go, maybe 2 more weeks or so. So it's going to happen eventually. It is an inevitability at this point. It's not going to happen. We got too many assets down there to simply let this go and not do anything. So I would say probably give it a week or two, to be totally honest, and we'll probably be ready for that invasion at that point, or at least maybe the U.S. will be ready for ground strikes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 49%. I do believe that the United States is going to be attacking very soon, but I will have to say, though, that very soon is most likely within weeks. Whenever anyone says that an attack is happening in days, you can be guaranteed it's actually going to happen in weeks. Usually militaries work on a much slower timetable than a lot of people would anticipate inside the public, and so very soon is within the next few weeks, at least by my criteria, so I would go with the 49%. But it is quite clear at this point that the United States is moving towards a direct action against Venezuela. We have suspended any diplomatic attempts with the Venezuelans, which is a clear sign that we're on the path to war. The Venezuelans are now preparing defenses inside of Venezuela, showing that they credibly believe that they are going to be under attack incredibly soon. We are basing forces in Trinidad and Tobago and trying to base some forces in Grenada. There is a large U.S. Naval and Marine Corps presence here, along with the presence of AC-130 Ghost Riders now, which generally would operate under the veil of complete air supremacy within an area. That means that we are most likely going to be seeing some sort of larger action at this point directly against Venezuela, most likely on land. That's what I would generally be assuming at this point. I do see some people talking about some questions here in the chat. Someone actually stated that Roosevelt Roads, the naval station in Puerto Rico, was closed years ago, and you would actually be correct with that, but Roosevelt Roads has actually recently been reopened, literally just to base the 22nd MU, as I've been told they're actually pronounced, out of. So this Roosevelt Roads air station is now reopened, which is also a significant sign to show that we're putting in a significant amount of effort for that matter, in actually getting the U.S. forces present and capable, or at least the proper infrastructure present and capable to be able to support prolonged operations against Venezuela. You usually do not reopen bases just to have a little show of force and then leave. So I would generally
Also, by the way, real quick, I did see Terry mention in the live chat. They said the longer we keep the Venezuelans at a high state of alert, the more dull their reaction times will get when the attack does finally happen. That is true. Most armies around the world tend to use that. That tends to be a pretty common MO these days. We've seen Iran and Israel. They both use that quite a lot when it comes to attacking each other. So that is something that they would do. So it is possible that maybe the U.S. is trying to simply wear them down by attacking these boats leaving Venezuela, which are alleged to be drug boats, and maybe they're sending all these flights close to the coast. So that way the Venezuelans sort of get lulled into a state of high alert, but also kind of dulled alert at the same time. And then when they're least expecting it, the U.S. might launch that attack. But I would still say, even with that happening, it's still probably weeks out. That's my guess. Probably 2 weeks.
I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, folks, it's pretty clear at this point there's going to be armed action. I see some people in the chat in denial saying the U.S. will never attack or invade Venezuela. It's going to happen at this point. We don't put all of these forces in an area like this and do nothing. It's incredibly rare. Like, for example, this is a great one. When we put all of those forces inside of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, so on and so forth, we then bombed Iran. So at least at a minimum, we are going to take some form of direct action on Venezuela. It's going to be airstrikes at a minimum or a ground invasion at the most. It's going to be one or the other, though. There really is no room in between. And so considering that we're seeing a large amount of forces once again in the Eastern Caribbean, we have to assume it's going to move from here. This isn't going to be some sort of a chickening out. This is going to be at least a direct airstrike inside of Venezuela or an airstrike campaign, or it will evolve into a direct armed invasion of Venezuela, one form or another. I would also have to say that a lot of people have seemed to be over um, accounting for Venezuela's ability to resist a U.S. invasion. And while I do not want to say that we will take Caracas in 3 days, because that generally seems to be a statement that ages like milk these days, I would say, however, that Venezuela's ability to resist is incredibly limited due to a myriad of factors, a load of them. For one, their military is heavily corrupt. Two, their nation is a dictatorship, usually meaning that loyalty is emphasized over proficiency, and that usually means that there's a decrease in combat efficiency or efficacy on the battlefield as a direct result of that. On top of that, Venezuelan armed forces are not paid too well. They're paid decently, at least compared to their countrymen, but not incredibly well, meaning that a lot of them wouldn't even really see a reason to stay and fight because they're not even getting paid too well. Another thing that we all have to consider is that the chances of any foreign weapons support to Venezuela are wildly limited. If the United States starts a war with Venezuela, Venezuela is most likely going to be blockaded from all incoming and outgoing commercial shipping traffic from around the world. Colombia will most likely not open up their borders for a Chinese arms smuggling operation or arms exchange operation to occur with Venezuela. Neither would Brazil. Brazil really can't anyways because of the Amazon rainforest and the complete impassableness of that region at the moment. So for that reason, Venezuela is largely cut off once a war starts, and unlike Ukraine, where if they resist, there is a hope of foreign support, there really is no chance of foreign support, even in arms support, by a foreign country. On top of that, another issue here that a lot of people are also not factoring in is that unlike Ukraine, which has a direct land border with NATO and is directly bordering the largest and strongest military alliance on the planet, Venezuela is not bordering any sort of a larger military alliance. Brazil is a member of BRICS, but Brazil is only a half member of BRICS, and BRICS is an economic alliance and not a military alliance. For that reason, Brazil cannot be counted as an actual power that would support Chinese or Russian interests inside of the region. On top of that, China and Russia have no naval or air force power projection abilities that would be able to reach to Venezuela. They have no supporting bases to be able to support aircraft on a long and arduous flight, either from Russia or China towards the area of Venezuela, nor do they have the ability, at least for maritime purposes, to be able to conduct expeditions this far out to Venezuela. If they used the Panama Canal, it would be a venture of nearly 11,000 miles. If they do not use the Panama Canal, it could be a venture of nearly 16,000 miles. The Chinese Navy has no way to be able to support or operate their Navy 16,000 miles away from China and then also conduct the round trip eventually back to China. If an armed conflict did... Go ahead.
But what they do have the ability to do, though, China does have some ability to respond. It's not militarily, like the enforcer's saying. They really don't have the military way to respond to this in Venezuela. But what they do have, though, and we're going to get to this later on in more detail, is rare earth metals. And what does Venezuela have? They have oil that China is very interested in. And China has rare earth metals that the United States is very interested in. So they do have a little bit of leverage there, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But they could respond with that type of resource wars. That could be what starts as a result of that. So I'm thinking maybe that might be the cause of maybe that effect that we're seeing today.
I would have to say that is actually a pretty good point. We're actually going to be getting into that a little bit later tonight, folks. But I see some people in the chat saying some interesting stuff. Someone said Maduro has done nothing wrong. And I would have to say that that's a pretty wild statement to make. We generally understand that Maduro appears to have rigged the last election according to multiple human rights and also the United Nations, if I'm understanding correctly. Many have stated that it appears that the last election appears to have been fibbed, and as a result of that, major uprisings happened throughout most major cities inside of Venezuela, which were then quickly put down by the Venezuelan military, police, and also private military organizations like the Wagner while they still existed. Since Maduro has taken power in Venezuela, the Venezuelan economy has fared wildly poor, and on top of that, we have also started to see that it starts to show dictatorial elements inside of its governance and administration, which generally would lead us to believe that a lot of people may not be that happy with Maduro, and also on top of that, he's not really that nice of a guy. On top of that, there is, if we want to work off of the official narrative that the United States is officially publishing, a large cartel presence, and the United States of America has directly stated that he is a part of that illegal narcotics operations and has put a $50 million bounty on his head as a result. So it's not really like Maduro is a great guy. That guy is not a nice guy. He is quite a bad guy. Not really that much of a question involved with that one.
Honestly, the bots will be calling Maduro Doolittle because he ain't do nothing in the eyes of the bots. Honestly, though, it's like, here's the thing, though. This is the way it works. I know some people don't like it. Some people, I hate to hear this, but the world, very nasty place, very nasty, especially on the geopolitical level. It's a very nasty place. It's cutthroat out there. So the way it works is, if a country like Venezuela decides to go and chum up with China, which is our enemy, our very big nemesis as the United States, well, Venezuela has become an enemy. And considering that Venezuela is in our sphere of influence, in our hemisphere, then they are going to be a target at that point. So all they can do is simply either basically cave to the United States demands, or they get militarily attacked. That's the way it works. Honestly, to me, if you're framing it from a Chinese sort of like diversion perspective here, also, by the way, there's a bot. Let me get him real quick. There you go. Enforcer got him. But if you frame it from a Chinese diversion perspective, like, for example, China's trying to get influence inside of Venezuela and also zap the resources there, it makes sense what we're doing. But if you look at it from the narco-terrorism perspective, it really doesn't make that much sense, because Venezuela is one piece of the larger narco puzzle that there is in South America. So it makes sense to a certain degree, but at the same time, though, it still stands, like we've been saying for a long time, that there's still bigger things happening in the world than Venezuela right now. Yes, China does have their tentacles in Venezuela, but there's also much larger issues in Europe right now. So it's still a bit of an odd timing to choose to do this.
I would also have to say, folks, a lot like Enforcer Matt said, beyond the justifications for saying Maduro is definitely not a nice guy, and maybe one of the most questionable leaders that we see inside of South and Central America currently, one thing I do want to make clear, folks, is that it does not really matter. And I'll put it out there to y'all this way. We are playing a larger strategic game at the moment, and so people who are not on our side are going to go. That's how it works. I know that a lot of people don't really like that idea, but I also have to say that fortunately those kind of people aren't running the government. Otherwise, this country wouldn't exist by now. We would have chalked up everything and sold it off, because we wouldn't be wanting a confrontation with anyone, and we would all want to sit around and hold hands under an authoritarian dictatorship, because that would be better than fighting. The thing is that Maduro's government is aligned with the Communist Chinese quite clearly, like many other countries, and that's generally the reason why we're going down there. That's the honest truth of it. So, if people don't like that, that's very unfortunate for those folks, but that's how the world turns. It's the same way that the Chinese work it, it's the same way that the Russians work it, and if we're not there, someone else is. So the real question is, who do you want to be your overlord, or your master, to put it that way? Do you want it to be the United States, or do you want it to be the Chinese? And considering that I'm an American, I would generally say that I'd rather like the whole thing run by the United States rather than the People's Republic of China. So that would be my 2 cents on the matter, and for that reason, that's why they're generally wanting to deal with that. Larger fish to fry still, of course. We do have the Chinese itself as a direct threat, and the Russians, but at the same time, this is something that I would say there is a decent argument in doing. It's just that I think that this could be done 5 to 7 years from now, and it would still be the same situation then that it is now. But moving on out of the Eastern Caribbean, however, and on into the rest of the world that we have, which is quite a large amount of news, at least at the moment. We have been able to see, at least within the area of the Indian subcontinent, some incredibly major developments coming out of this area. Pakistan has bombed Afghanistan again tonight, and we are hearing of more explosions being heard in multiple cities across Afghanistan. The Taliban have now directly responded and have given the following as a statement. Pakistan violated Afghan airspace, bombed a civilian market near the Durand Line, and infringed upon Kabul. If the situation escalates further, the consequences will be the responsibility of the Pakistani military. That is the statement by the Afghan government, or the Taliban, today. The Pakistani...
So odd. Isn't that weird how the tables turn like this? Like, all of a sudden, the Taliban, who's now in charge of Afghanistan, which is already a head spinner right there with that one. That's really a doozy to get your head around that in the first place. But at the same time, though, now you have India allegedly going to the Taliban in Afghanistan and telling the Taliban to launch covert attacks on Pakistan. It's like, First of all, I have a lot of questions about that, whether or not that's true or not. And number two, it's like, didn't Pakistan help the Taliban at one point, or am I mistaken?
Oh yeah, like they helped out their their older, I guess you could say father for the large part, the Mujahideen. But the Taliban is kind of like an offshoot of the Mujahideen.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like the way this is going, like these days, it's so weird. It's like everything that should be straightforward is becoming extremely complicated, like a spider web. Honestly, what is your take? Do you think India actually went to the Taliban and got the Taliban to launch covert attacks on Pakistan? Because I really can't find anything to really substantially back that up, rather than the Pakistanis claiming that India did that. So, what's your take? What's your speculation on it? Because I can't tell.
Nah. No chance in hell. Like there is no chance. India, to explain to y'all a little bit of the internal political situation in India, and I'm not getting political here, I'm just going to explain to y'all how they operate. India is a hyper nationalist Hindu state for the large part with how they operate currently. That's a big reason why they had the independence war back in the day and Pakistan became an independent country. But that's beside the point. That's a whole other rabbit hole for a whole other time. India absolutely cannot stand Islamic countries at all. They consider them to be hostile to Hindu beliefs and also to the Indian state. So the idea of India ever conducting an action with Afghanistan and spurring a very Islamic group based deeply inside of their Sharia beliefs, or at least their Sharia legal systems and culture, to then conduct an attack on Pakistan, that is highly unlikely from a diplomatic stage. The Indians might try and do that, but at the same time, what could they gain? They would also know that this would be a zero-sum game to play with the Afghans, because the Afghans really couldn't achieve anything with what they can do. The truth of it is that now that the Afghans, or generally the Taliban, is the one running the country inside of Afghanistan, they're just running into natural border skirmishes with the Pakistanis on the border. And they're not big. I mean, it's nothing big at all. We've been covering it here and there occasionally, and it'll just be a little firefight. Someone will get wounded, they'll get clipped on their wrist or, in the armpit or something like that. It's nothing big. And it'll only happen here and there every couple of months. And that's the reason why Pakistan, from what I understand, is airstriking them today, is a culmination of every single wrist and armpit that's been clipped by a bullet. It's now being taken out in frustration with these airstrikes. That's generally how it's working at the moment. I would have to say this is more so an Afghan-Pakistani matter than it is a Pakistani-Indian matter by proxy. It doesn't really appear that it has any credence to that claim. But I do have to get y'all to that claim, speaking of which, because this is the statement that was made by the Minister of Pakistan, Shahbaz, today. The Pakistani military has officially accused India of using the Afghan Taliban to attack Pakistan. Now that is a little bit wild. That is actually a little bit crazy, I'm not going to lie, folks. And I would have to tell y'all, this situation is quite wild. I'll be honest with y'all, however, I think that this is just being used by the Pakistanis as a justification, much like the U.S. is looking for with Venezuela right now, to get into a war with India, considering that the Indus Water Treaty has not been reinstated yet, and they don't want to say that that's the reason they're going for war, so they're just going to say that the Afghans attacked them on the request of the Indians, and for that reason, the whole thing's getting right back at it. I think that that's probably what they're aiming for right now. But we also know that a lot of people are aiming to get an answer to this question that Enforcer Matt has asked all of y'all. And this time, folks, Enforcer Matt has been unforgiving. He has not given y'all an unsure option. It is a yes and no answer. You either have to give a yes or a no to this question. Are you in favor of attacking Venezuela? And that question is in the literal sense, as of right now, would you be in favor of it? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. And also, by the way, I got to give a shout out to the Pakistani military there with that PowerPoint they had up on the screen. That was a wild PowerPoint. I'm not sure you saw what they wrote on it, but that was a crazy PowerPoint right there. It kind of looks reminiscent of the PowerPoint presentations they give here in the U.S. To the armed forces. Kind of interesting. But anyways, getting to the poll question right here, jumping back to Venezuela real quick, a very simple question. Are you in favor of the U.S. attacking Venezuela? This is an evenly split poll, literally down to the percentage. I've never seen it like this. Exactly 50% said yes, and exactly 50% said no. So, never seen a poll like that, by the way. This is an extremely, extremely divisive issue, an exact 50-50. To be totally honest with you, I'm not in favor of attacking Venezuela for the sole reason, because right now there are bigger fish to fry, and the timing is really bad. If it weren't for the timing, I would say that it would be prudent to deal with the Chinese influence that has suddenly found its way into Venezuela, and really it's not suddenly, it's been creeping in over a long period of time, but it's really ramping up here recently. So just for the reason of timing, I say no. If it weren't for timing issues, I would say yes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm also with the 50%. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm with the no's. I'll say this really quickly because I don't want people to think that I'm completely disagreeing with the yeses. I definitely see a argument for conducting a military intervention against Venezuela because of the Chinese influence, but not right now. That is the problem. That's the problem that I have that would put me in the camp with the no's. I think that this is something that could be dealt with in 5 to 7 years, which is quite a long ways away. So meaning in the literal sense, I'm not in support of this at all right now. There are a lot of big fish to fry, and we're not frying them right now because we're entirely focused on this one little thing that doesn't really affect anything at all. Just to quickly put this out there, the Panama Canal is a significant canal and a shipping lane, but it only accounts for 5% of global trade. Now, let's put that into perspective. If we had to take one and lose the other in between the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, what would make more sense? Losing 5%, a potential 5% maximum global trade passing through the Panama Canal, an efficiency concern, versus losing 11% of global shipping, which passes through the Suez Canal, which is directly threatened by Houthi armed actions inside of the southern Red Sea. Every time the Houthis blow up a ship and sink it in that area, every single one of those ships that would have gone through the Suez Canal, 11% of global shipping, now has to take the long and lengthy and costly trip around the Cape of Good Hope at the south of Africa. Now, with that in mind, I would clearly say that if we had to deal with one or the other right now, I would even say that the Houthis are higher priority than the Venezuelans right now because of the kind of impact they're having on global shipping. And that's also another reason why I'm saying Venezuela is such a low priority. I could not say that military intervention currently would be a justifiable action. On top of that, folks, we have to take a step back and we have to look at the full picture here. Venezuela is a problem, sure, and if we put it in a vacuum, we can make it the biggest problem we want, but we're not in a vacuum. The United States is operating as the leader of a global sphere. Right now, all of our allies in Europe, our largest trading partner, we have a collective trade with Europe that is around $1.1 trillion as of this year, is about to be attacked by the Russian Federation. In terms of economic significance alone, protecting the Europeans or helping to fight with the Europeans is a number one priority. A number two priority, which may start to emerge as a number one priority, is the Chinese preparations for an invasion of Taiwan, or largely put it in our form, a defense of Taiwan. That is a number two priority right now. Beats out most everything else around the world. The Taiwanese produce the huge amounts of wafers and semiconductors that we use in our computers here in the West. If they fall, the semiconductors go. If they fall, our island defense chain against the Chinese also goes as well. And that means that the second largest military power in the world, if we go to war with them in the future, we'll be able to bypass our island defense chain and wreak unimaginable havoc on the shipping lanes in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. That is terrifying. That almost is apocalyptic, to be entirely honest with you all, in a global shipping sense. Then, on top of that, we have the Iranians, which are developing a nuclear weapon. And we still don't know how close they are to developing a nuclear weapon after they were set back a bit by Operation Midnight Hammer in the 12-Day War, but they're getting there around again to getting a nuclear weapon, probably within the next year or two again. So they were also an inevitable issue to deal with. So when we look at this thing outside of a vacuum, we have, number one, the defense of Europe, which is our key priority, along with supporting Ukraine, which falls into that by extension. We also have the preparation to defend Taiwan from a Chinese invasion, and we also have to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons that can directly target and threaten the United States. Even number four, we have to deal with the Houthis, which are threatening a vital shipping lane that would be important in any situation, in any conflict, whether it starts in Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. Venezuela doesn't even fall in that category. Venezuela would be number 5 or number 7 on the priority list at the moment right now. I just do not see a way that we can justify putting all of our U.S. military assets, efforts, and expenditures into dealing with a country that does not pose an imminent threat or risk right now compared to everything else we're having to size up around the world. So I would have to be with the 50% that said no, at least for now. When we have nothing going on, maybe we can go down there and do something about that if everyone's on board it then. But right now, I just don't really see a good justification to do that at this moment. And I hope that makes a great deal of sense, my position and where I'm coming from on that, because I'm all for supporting American and Western interests, and having a Chinese-backed Venezuela is definitely not within America's interests, but it's also not the largest threat to American interests that exists in our world right now. So with that, hope that addressed that well. And we also have another question to ask all of y'all, considering that we are once again returning back to the Indian subcontinent at the moment. A lot of people are talking about the Pakistanis accusing India of using the Afghan Taliban to attack their nation. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts and comments on that one. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So, what do you think is happening with this whole situation between Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan? Because it's very odd and very novel and confusing. So, what do you think? And it looks like 35% said war will restart on India and Pakistan, while 30% said it's just posturing and squabbling, and 21% said it seems like foreign prodding that's getting this started again. So, right now, there's really no concrete proof that we've seen presented so far by the Pakistanis proving that India prodded the Afghan Taliban to attack the Pakistani border. I personally haven't seen that proof right now, so we're going off the statements of Pakistan almost completely to sort of back that claim up, which is very shaky ground. So I would say generally it seems like posturing and squabbling, and like the Pakistanis are taking this as an opportunity to blame India for something that the Taliban did, based on what we're seeing right now. So it looks like Pakistan is going to maybe start an airstrike campaign that could last for maybe a week or longer, because so far it's lasted 2 days, and they've been bombing Afghanistan pretty strongly over the last 2 days, which is something that's brand new. That's something that Pakistan just started doing, which is kind of remarkable to see. So I'm with the 30%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't really know. I'd have to be within the unsure and undecided camp. Pakistan and India are wild countries to say the least, at least in foreign policy these days, and generally unpredictable now. So I would have to say that I'm unsure where this is heading at this point. And I would have to say, folks, that the prevailing foreign policy predictions of this year, I'm going to call it right now before the year's even out. This whole year, the entire analysis has been everything is so unpredictable, it's really hard to figure out what's going to happen next. It's been like that all year. It still is like that. It doesn't even matter whether it's America or another country. It's just absolutely unpredictable what this year has been. It changes from day to day. There's really no way to even follow it at this point in any meaningful way to create analysis out of it. So I would have to be honest with y'all. I don't know if this is going to create a larger war with India or whether this is just some sort of yapping that the Pakistanis are doing. It's a little bit unclear. But we do have something interesting. Speaking of something... Oh, go ahead.
Also, by the way, I was just laughing. Someone said, but Pakistan's PowerPoint was so official looking. How could they be wrong? Honestly, here's a tip for the not the Taliban, obviously not for them, but a tip for the Pakistanis. They could add, like, you know how the U.S. military does enforce how they put like the classification level at the top with the color bar at the top to let you know what classification level it is. Put like unclassified in the green color bar at the very top. That'll make it look even more official. There you go, Pakistan. I helped you out.
Oh yeah, like we gotta have that. But I gotta say, these PowerPoints, they are definitely PowerPoints. We can say that at a minimum. So moving on out of that, we do want to show y'all something that was spotted on satellite here in China recently, which is the arrival of these GJ-11 sharp sword unmanned air vehicles, or unmanned combat air vehicles, which were spotted at an operational airbase today. We do not know what theater command it was in, however. Still interesting to note, and I also have to note the one that's made of rust over here on the far right. That thing already rusted up. They're going to have to get some steel wool and some motor oil out and start rubbing that thing clean of the rust.
That's a special feature right there. A very expensive coating. They call it the rust. Let's see, what could you call this? Like a fancy special technical name. No, Rust-Oleum. That's a paint brand. Okay, it's already taken. But you could call it. Let's see here. What's the rust stealth coating? I don't know. I can't come up with it on the spot.
Resistant, unidentifiable stealth technologies. That stands for rust. That stands for rust. And they have one of those rusty GJ-11 sharp swords out there at this tarmac. So, quite interesting to know. And I gotta say, very interesting indeed. But moving on. Oh, man, that voice crack. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But moving on out of China, it is time for us to get on into some other major news. Speaking of the Chinese, out of the United States, We have a lot about this, so let me get y'all through it. So, actually, let me see if I got the Truth Social post here. Let's see here. We don't want that one. Is it this one? Oh man, did I put the Truth Social post in here? I don't think I did. Is it this one? I did not put the Truth Social post in here, so I will just have to read you what I have at this point. So, here's what we have as an excerpt from the Truth Social post about the president on the Chinese. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. I always felt that they've been lying in wait, and now, as usual, I have been proven right. There is no way that China should be allowed to hold the world captive, but that seems to have been their plan for quite some time, starting with the magnets and other elements that they have quietly amassed into somewhat of a monopoly position. A rather sinister and hostile move, to say the least. But the U.S. has monopoly positions also, much stronger and far more reaching than China's. Some of the biggest, some of the greatest, they say. I have not just chosen to use them. There was never a reason for me to do so until now. So the president has now announced that we are going to be putting 100% tariffs on China, and the stock market went just right after that. It lost about $1.2 trillion in market value over the course of the day. And most of the major technologies and industries here in the United States have gone quite significantly down, at least in the amount of points. We did see, though, that Walmart actually did pretty decently today. It actually rose a little bit. So it seems that a lot of people are rallying with Walmart. They believe in Walmart, which is good to know. But that's what happened today generally, and it does appear that the United States is now going to be engaging in another trade war with the Chinese. We also were able to hear that apparently the president stated that there was a meeting with Xi in 2 weeks, but now there doesn't really seem to be a reason for a meeting. And then it was stated later that there might still be a chance at a meeting, and they're not really sure, and they're trying to figure that one out. So that's the situation that we know of right now. The whole reason why this has happened today is because, like the President of the United States has stated in his Truth Social, he has alleged that the People's Republic of China is starting to withhold rare earth metals, or trying to encourage other countries that either mine or produce some sort of refined rare earth metal products to not trade with Western nations. And that in itself could end up being a pretty disastrous sort of an outcome for the Western economy as a whole, considering that a lot of rare earth metals are used in semiconductor and computer production. So it does appear that the president has now started the move to start another trade war with the Chinese, which means that it's a bad time to be in the model railroading business, unfortunately for all those folks. But beyond that, a lot of people have also been talking about what this means. What does this mean, this whole tariff situation and the Chinese holding back the magnets and other stuff? What does it mean? And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So to basically summarize it in a nutshell, the U.S. president is basically trying to say, and I'm paraphrasing this, that China is trying to monopolize the rare earth metals, and they're trying to choke the market to a certain degree, so that way China controls everything. So now the U.S. is warning of new tariffs and escalation as a result of that, and we've already seen tariffs as of today. And what are your thoughts? And 49% said China is preparing for war by doing this, while 28% said the U.S. is simply looking to justify the trade war, and 14% said China is punishing for action that's about to be taken against Venezuela. So I would say personally, and also, by the way, just for some backstory, by the way, China is the largest rare earths exporter in the world. They by far refine and also extract the most rare earths of any country on the planet. So China already had a natural monopoly on the rare earth metals, and now they're trying to control the export markets in other countries to prevent the U.S. from getting their hands on these rare earth metals. So that is a major national security issue. That is a major issue. Some folks might be like, well, why is that so serious? Well, during the war, you need those rare earths. You have to have those. And if China, our biggest adversary, is trying to choke that off, that would be the biggest problem ever during a war. And also, Russia is a huge supplier of uranium and materials like that. So our adversaries are controlling a lot of those materials, and that's a big problem. So I would say that China is actually probably doing this in preparations for a possible world war. It's my guess. I'm with the 50%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be honest with y'all. I think that the Chinese might be preparing for war. I would have to be with 51% as well. It sounds as though they most likely would be, because if y'all do not know, rare earths are incredibly important for practically every single modern facet of a country's economy these days. They are used in electric cars, they're used in smartphones, they're used in all sorts of electronic systems. Practically every single electronic system on the planet has some sort of a rare earth metal inside of it in one way or another. And so for that reason, China does have a fairly significant monopoly on the general economics surrounding the rare earths. And I would say that the suspension of shipping those, or trying to encourage other countries not to ship, is something that is generally going to lead us to believe that this might be a prelude to war, or trying to put the United States and the rest of the Western world in a pretty tough economic position, or a pretty tough material position before that conflict begins. The incredibly concerning sort of a development, to say the least. Also, some people have said rare earths are not rare. Rare earths are rare. Like, they are actually a little rare, hence the reason why they're rare, or called rare. They are not really found commonly throughout the world, and deposits of them are kind of a little bit iffy to come by, at least in a lot of countries. The United States is the second largest possessor of rare earth deposits in the world, and even at that, we only have about 20% of the deposits that China has, meaning that China kind of ended up striking it rich, at least in our modern age, by having all of those rare earth metals inside of their country. So that's a bit of an unfortunate thing for us, very fortunate thing for the Chinese, but it does appear that we're going to be trying to stranglehold them economically to force them to reopen the trade of the rare earth metals and so on.
That's the thing though. With China plays the long game. They've probably thought this out already, how this was going to go and how the U.S. would react to it. Is the right move really starting a brand new trade escalation with China? Because I know that seems like the first thing that you'd want to go for, but at the same time though, China probably already game planned that out, because with China controlling and monopolizing all the rare earth metals, they know they have leverage. So what leverage does the U.S. really have over China? I'm not sure if it's as strong as we think, because if the U.S. puts 100% tariffs, like I think we've heard that, by the way, they said they put 100% tariffs back on China on top of all the other ones. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, so if they've done that now, that's supposed to economically hurt China and punish them for doing that. But is it going to really hurt China enough for them to lift it? And me personally, I would say probably not, honestly. I think they've already factored that in and decided the risk was worth taking, which is concerning to me, because it seems like China's already thought about it and the U.S. hasn't. So all it's doing is really hurting the U.S. economy a hell of a lot. Like we saw today, like it was like $1 trillion plus got wiped out or something like that from the market value. So a very large drop today. It's not quite a crash. Like it's a little too extreme to say it's a crash, but it's certainly going the wrong direction. And it looks like fear is starting to take over in the U.S. stock market, and it's starting to go downhill.
And I would have to definitely say that it was not necessary. I would have to be honest with y'all. It's not a good move to put tariffs on China as a result of this, because it's not really going to hurt. It's actually hurting us a lot more at this point than it's hurting them, at least for now. And so I would say that might have not been the best move, and it's once again sending the economy into another free fall. And of course, if y'all haven't been paying attention throughout the year, we've been in about 3 free falls so far. 2 of them created because of tariff scares. Now there's a third one, and then another fourth one was created just because. So I would say that this is probably not the best thing for us to have at this point, at least in my honest opinion. And I would say that there was probably other ways that we could have dealt with the Chinese rather than just slamming 100% tariffs on them again. Because if you also weren't following along through the last tariff scares, when those tariffs came forward, or when they were even moving forward, a lot of people were having a really hard time economically. And I would have to say it's just not a smart thing to do. And I know a lot of people, like, I find it a little bit interesting, folks. I got to say this. Some people are totally against the war in Ukraine because it causes unnecessary suffering, and some people are against the war in Venezuela because it causes unnecessary suffering. But whenever it comes to Americans unnecessarily having to suffer because of the implementation of incredibly high tariffs, then everyone tells those Americans that they just have to bite the bullet and just go through it. And whatever happens, happens. And if they go broke and are living under a bridge, they'll just have to live under a bridge, which I don't think is the greatest answer to dealing with Americans who are running companies that have to outsource and offshore their manufacturing, because there is no manufacturing here within the United States that actually does produce those very items that they try to sell. It's like, how in the world are they supposed to do anything about it? Most of them can't. And so we're pretty much putting them into an impossible situation and screwing them over pretty much blatantly at that point. That's not really a good move. So with that, I hope that does address it.
Also, isn't it kind of interesting as well? What's a little bit interesting here is this. Remember back when we needed rare earth metals from the USSR back in the day when we were trying to develop, like, let's say the SR-72? Wait, SR-72 or SR-71? I'm getting them mixed up. Yeah, SR-71. I'm jumping ahead. Not the SR-72, not that one. That's not out yet. Maybe soon. But the SR-71, we need to get that titanium from Russia, the USSR at the time. So we had to go create shell companies. So that way we can go get that stuff from the USSR without them knowing it and have that to build our aircraft. Today, though, China is already jumping ahead on that. They're expecting the U.S. to go to other countries where China exports these rare metals to and then buy it from these third-party countries. But China's already getting two steps ahead of us on that and telling those countries by sending out letters allegedly to not sell to the United States and choke the market. So that seems a little bit concerning to me. It seems a little bit concerning. It seems like China's already game planning that out well ahead than previously.
Yeah, I would have to say so. Also, on top of that, I saw someone say this in the chat, and this was something that's pretty funny. Someone said, people say rare earths aren't rare, and then putting like asterisks, then explains why they're rare anyways. I don't think a lot of people are understanding. Rare earth metals are called rare earth metals because the amount of deposits that are accessible easily are incredibly rare. Like, there's a lot of deposits, sure, but you have to dig extremely deep to access most of them. And on top of that, another thing that makes them exceptionally rare is that the veins, the deposit veins of the metals, are incredibly low density, meaning that you have to extract a massive amount of ore to be able to refine it into an actual, say, ingot or some other form of an actual refined metal. That's what makes the rare earth metals, quote unquote, rare. It's not that, like, of course, when you put it onto a global scale, like this as well, when you put it on a global scale and you say that oil is running out, oil is not running out. The accessible deposits of oil are running out, but there is more oil further down below the surface of the planet that we could hypothetically get access to eventually, meaning that even right now, the access to oil is infinite, but that's only in theory. As far as our extraction technologies and abilities, we have a finite supply relative at this moment, much like we do on rare earths. And so that is kind of the I guess you could say qualifier as to why they are called a rare earth. That's also the reason why you see that China really is the only major producer of any rare earth ores around the world as well, is because they really are the only country right now that has any easily accessible deposits. That's generally also no reason, and that also further proves the idea that they're rare, because if they weren't rare, like people are saying, the U.S. would be able to just dig into the ground and find some potatoes. We can't. That's why we trade with the Chinese to get their rare earths, and then we give them almost nothing in return. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses that somewhat well. But it's a little bit of an interesting thing with that, to be honest with y'all. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to move on down into the middle of the East. But before we get on into the middle of the East, we do have to take a quick break for a moment. I've got to say a massive thanks to all of y'all so far for watching the show. We've actually had about 60,000 viewers at this point, and a live stream viewership of 13.4 thousand people at the peak tonight. That is a lot of people. And I got to say a huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching so far. We still have a lot more to go, but we always like to take a little bit of a breather at this point in the show to be able to get to chit chat with all of y'all for just a brief second before we get to all the rest of the news for the night, which is going to be the Middle East and also everything in Europe. But before we get into all of that, Matthew, let's get a couple of questions from the chat. What do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, we're going to grab 3 and then get right back to our news. This first one goes to Little Bear, who puts in a very generous $50 support. And thank you very much, Little Bear, for that generous support, and also helping to keep us on the air. It's that support that does it. And Little Bear said, for your move, and best wishes, gents.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support for our move. Our move is coming up soon. very soon, and we will be going to Salt Lake City. I don't know why I say that like that every time, but I do. But beyond that, I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling and helping us to eventually move Enforcer HQ 3.0 all the way out to Salt Lake City, near to the Great Salt Lake. And they call the Great Salt Lake great, but did they make it great again? That's the real question, folks. Is it just the Salt Lake nowadays, or is it the Great Salt Lake? I mean, the Great Salt Lake has lost a lot of its land area, in a sense, because it's drying up a little bit. So is it really the Great Salt Lake anymore, or is it the Salt Lake? These are deep thoughts with the Enforcer, and this is the kind of questions that we need answers to here on this channel. But beyond that, I got to thank you massively for helping us to get the Enforcer HQ 3.0 moving fund to be able to get out there to Salt Lake, and hopefully we'll be able to get out there incredibly soon. I also saw Zaku in the chat just say, I want to go to Park City. Don't we all? Get in line, buddy. But beyond that, I want to go to Park City too. Park City looks so cool. Let me show y'all like a couple of pictures of Park City. Like, look at this place. Wow, it's really neat.
That is nice right there. Very expensive too.
Oh, so expensive. It's unreal, honestly. It's unreal. But there's so many cool things around here, like Bald Mountain and Scott Hill and other places. And it's like, wow, that is just so beautiful. Look at that, folks. Look at that. That is gorgeous. You can even see the little ski slope paths over there, I'm assuming at least, that you can go skiing on in the winter. A really beautiful and picturesque sort of a place. I'll be honest with y'all, that kind of looks a little bit like Georgia, like the nation of Georgia to some extent, right here near the Caucasus Mountain Range. That kind of looks a little bit like it, actually, which is kind of a little wild. And here it is in winter, in case you didn't know what it looks like in winter. But still, a massive thanks to you so much once again for the moving fund, and hopefully we'll be able to get out there fairly soon. Actually, it's not hopefully, it's actually a guarantee we're going to be getting out there very soon. But beyond that, it is time for us to get on into the next one, but a humongous thanks to you so much once again.
Indeed. And our next one here goes to Knight of the Light 50, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that generous support and also helping to keep our channel on the air. He said, did Russia send nukes to Venezuela?
No, absolutely not. They did not send nukes to Venezuela. There is no Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0 happening down there, that you can be assured of. So I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because, and also I have to explain this, because a lot of people try to clickbait things, and a lot of people put out false stories, and so I'll explain why this one is false. I'll debunk the whole thing, because it doesn't make sense when you stand it up to the modern day. The Cuban Missile Crisis happened because the Soviet Union did not have an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States. So what they did as their workaround is that they took intermediate range ballistic missiles and placed them in Cuba, which put those missiles within range of most of the lower 48. That's the reason why we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. They didn't have a longer range missile, so that's why the missiles were put in Cuba. In the modern day, Russia has intercontinental ballistic missiles, and those can be launched from Russia and fly all the way around the world and hit the United States. So why would they need to put strategic nuclear weapons for that matter, in Venezuela when they already have the ability to hit and destroy the United States in real life from Russia? And therefore it wouldn't make any logical sense to do that sort of a move and put nuclear weapons in Venezuela. That's something that you would have seen back in the 60s. We did that back in the 50s with Turkey. We actually put nuclear weapons, strategic ones for that matter, on the northern coast of Turkey, so that way if a war broke out, our bombers could fly directly into, actually it was, I think it was some form of a missile, but our missiles and bombers could fly directly out of Turkey right into the heart of the Soviet Union and nuke everything in sight. That's actually what led to Khrushchev putting the nuclear weapons in Cuba, if y'all didn't know. And then a quiet agreement was made that the U.S. would withdraw our nuclear weapons from Turkey, and the Soviets would withdraw their nuclear weapons from Cuba. So generally, there wouldn't be a purpose for any nuclear weapons to be based in Venezuela these days, because Russia could achieve exactly their nuclear destruction goals from the Russian mainland itself, and they wouldn't have to put any nuclear weapons in Venezuela to be able to achieve that. So I hope that does address that the best that I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, though, and I hope that does explain why that story would not really be an accurate one or a true one, because there's a lot of stories going around right now, and there's always a lot of people who are peddling stories that don't really have a lot of truth to them, and they're saying that's 100% fact. Like, there's another story going around right now that Xi Jinping has had a stroke, and there is literally no proof out there right now, folks, to confirm or even say that there's any credence to that story that Xi Jinping has had a stroke. Others are saying that Xi Jinping is trying to flee the country. We also have no proof of that as well. Back in the day, there was a rash of stories that came out in the Ukraine war that every single day there was a great train heist that happened, and for some reason all of Russia's most rare and valuable stuff was on every single train that was hijacked, and somehow they were also able to drive that train right across the border into Ukraine, although in real life that would never be possible. And, stories like that are always coming out. But I always want to make sure to tell folks, make sure to listen to stories with a decent amount of discernment, because while on this channel we always like to back up our news with as much facts and validity as possible, other channels, really, not to say channels, really other outlets aren't always dedicated to that heavily, and they're more so dedicated to just getting out a good story, even if it's not true at all. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address the question well and also debunk the rumor that's going around about that. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and our last one goes to Mark Ead, and Mark puts in a $50 support as well. And a huge shout to you, Mark, for that support as well, and helping to keep us on the air. And he said, let's see here, Chur Boys from New Zealand, South LOC.
Hey, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, what did that super chat mean, Jack? What did it mean?
I think it was a typo, probably. He said "Chur Boys" from. I think he meant to say "Cheers." Cheers, boys from New Zealand.
I gotta thank you, Mark, for the cheers. You gotta. Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. But beyond that, I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running all the way down from New Zealand. And I gotta be honest with y'all, folks, have y'all looked at New Zealand recently? That place is a land rich with natural beauty. Take a look at Fiordland National Park. Wow, it's beautiful.
Oh, wow.
This looks fake, but it's real. That's the crazy thing about it. It's gorgeous down here. Honestly, folks, I gotta say, the natural beauty of the earth is boundless. Truly a crazy sort of a place. And you know what's even crazier, folks, is that if y'all don't know, most of the Lord of the Rings movies, if I'm not mistaken, were actually filmed here in New Zealand. So most of the scenery that they're using in the film is actually here from New Zealand. So a little bit of an interesting fact about that. It is so beautiful looking that you can pretty much sell it as a faraway fantasy land, which isn't really that far off because it does look like something purely out of fantasy. But beyond that, a real compliment for y'all down there. Y'all have a gorgeous country. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you so much for the support, Mark, and helping this channel keep it running all the way down there from New Zealand. And I hope that you've been enjoying the show tonight, because a lot of people enjoy the natural beauty of the North and South Islands of New Zealand. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And of course,
Also, by the way, before we move on real quick, I do want to bring y'all a piece of breaking news that happened just right now. We have gotten news out of Iran, and this is a very quick thing before we move on to our scheduled news segment. An Iranian senior political official has proposed creating an alternative to the Nobel Peace Prize called the Nasrallah Prize.
Oh, oh my God.
Oh, man. I don't know if you want that prize, because I'm not sure if Nasrallah ended up very well. So I would have to personally say, no thanks. I would have to pass on that one right there. I would have to pass and say, double it and give it to the next person. I'm gonna have to skip.
Wait, if you double and give it to the next person, is that like a Soleimani award at that point?
Yeah. You start going through the long line of Iranian officials, like the Nasrallah, the Soleimani Prize, the Bagheri Prize, the Raisi Prize. Like, honestly, these are some prizes you don't ever want to win.
Man, and then eventually, man, you get the one that trumps them all, the Doha Prize. like you get the Doha. Man, honestly, it's a crazy world out there at this point. It's a crazy one, folks. Really crazy. But beyond that, I would have to say that whole thing's special. Oh, by the way, if y'all didn't hear, the president did not get a Nobel. It actually was the opposition candidate in Venezuela that got the Nobel. And there was a huge hoopla about that today. I would just be honest with y'all. I don't know why a lot of people were shocked about that. I was not expecting the president for a minute to get the Nobel, because generally, if you look at the people who get the Nobel, let me go show y'all the Nobel people, like Nobel Peace Prize people. Let me go show y'all that, or the list of them at least. Let me go get y'all the list. Where the hell is the list? Where, let's see. Here we are. So here is the list. Let me get to the modern day so that way we can see some names that some people may know. And let me go through them year by year. So right now, Maria Corina Machado is the one who got the medal for this year. Last year, it was Nihon Hidankyo for its efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, and for demonstrating through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used again. And that was the award for 2024. Like, I don't know why a lot of people thought it would be handed to a president of the United States, because if you go through the list, I don't really think any, or hardly any, U.S. presidents have ever been given one. Obama was given one. Interesting enough, Al Gore was given one. Let's see. Carter actually got one as well in 2002. He wasn't even president by then, by the way, folks. Bush was president when that one was given out. The United Nations got one. What the hell? Like, anyways, moving on from that. All right, that's one hell of a one. Let's see. Dang.
I think there used to be a really nasty guy from Europe, I believe, that got a Nobel Peace Prize, like way back in the day, that wasn't so savory.
Oh my, I didn't know this, folks. Anwar Sadat actually got a Nobel. I did not know that. If you don't know, Anwar Sadat was a fairly influential president slash dictator, really a dictator of Egypt back during the Cold War. Nixon absolutely loved Sadat. But Sadat was actually assassinated in 1981 in the middle of a military parade by one of the soldiers in the parade. He just took his rifle, which was loaded, aimed it right at the bleachers, and fired right at him, striking him, I think, twice and killing him. But he actually got one in 1978 for jointly having negotiated peace between Egypt and Israel in 1978. And that also was duly given to Menachem Begin from Israel as well simultaneously. Let's see, any other presidents? I'm trying to... Kissinger got one? Oh, it's for the Vietnam. I was like, what? I was like, let's see, Martin Luther King Jr. got one. The Red Cross got one. But also notice, folks, I'm scrolling through a large list of people that y'all have never even heard of. Let's see, George C. Marshall actually got one for the Marshall Plan. That's actually pretty cool. That's actually well deserved. Let's see. Oh, let's see here. Not awarded due to World War II. Oh, like, oh man, they just completely opted out. But let's see. I think, Matthew, that guy, the mustache man you're talking about, I think he was nominated for one, but he didn't ever get it, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe so, possibly. Yeah, I don't see him on the list here, so maybe not. Scroll up and see if maybe it's up top.
Oh, hey, folks, we finally got another president. We did get Woodrow Wilson. So that's another president of the United States. Y'all can see, though, that presidents getting a Nobel, it's exceptionally rare. It's pretty much almost very rarely ever happen. Oh, look, Teddy Roosevelt. Hey, Teddy Roosevelt, my boy, my favorite. He got one. And he also got one for ending the Russo-Japanese War. Well-deserved medal, actually, because that was like a work of diplomatic masterpiece, if y'all know about it, how it was generally brought to an end. But let's see here. Let's just type it in. Hitler a nominee. There it was, nominated. And the answer is, yes, he was in 1939.
Oh, at least he never got it, at least. That sort of made up for, the whole situation.
Yeah, but a lot of people are always nominated every year for the Nobel Peace Prize. Getting nominated doesn't really mean much. Getting the medal means a lot. And so that's a fairly interesting sort of a deal to see. But beyond that, folks, I just got to say, I don't really know why a lot of people were expecting the president to get one and acting like the whole thing's a farce now, because if you look through most of the medals, usually they're given out to groups of people, a person or groups of people you probably never even heard about most of the time, 99% of the time. And you could say that a lot of presidents have taken a lot of significant steps and efforts in diplomacy much like the current one. You know, the list is endless. But anyways, moving on from that, though, and on into Europe, we have been able to see that inside of Belgium today, the NATO General Secretary, Mark Rutte, has stated that NATO's annual nuclear deterrence drill, Steadfast Noon, will begin on the 13th of October. While that was being said, an unidentified drone flew over a nuclear early warning aircraft inside of Germany, according to Der Spiegel. So it disappeared that we are still seeing drone incursions once again over sensitive military sites and installations. In the meantime, we also heard in Poland that the Russians are starting a new attempt at a false flag. A fake about an alleged attack preparation by Ukraine has been recorded spreading in Poland. This was reported by the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Poland, which added the material is being spread by the Russian side. Analysis of the spread of this information indicates a planned information operation. Its goal is always the same, to cut Ukraine off from the support of Poland and NATO countries, and only the lies change. Earlier, the Russian Foreign Ministry representative Zakharova claimed that Ukraine is allegedly preparing a false flag provocation, preparing Russian drones and striking NATO transport hubs in Poland and Romania with them in order to blame Russia and drag the alliance into war. Russia often uses such statements as information operations to prepare the ground for its own strikes and preemptively ship the blame onto Ukraine, which is a given for the large part. Moving us on into Moscow, however, some things were not given today. Some things were more so taken away. Like, for example, the statement by Putin that he has made today, stating that Zelensky's threat to strike the Kremlin with Tomahawks are not only a part of blackmail, but also posturing, generally showing the Russians are actually quite scared of the Tomahawk, calling the Tomahawk as a blackmail element now instead of anything, pretty much showing that Putin has no confidence that they could intercept a Tomahawk, because if they could intercept a Tomahawk easily, then there would be no blackmail involved. It would just be shot down, case in point, and it's all over. We did also hear at the same time that Putin had announced that Russia will soon reveal new weapons. According to him, Moscow is not afraid of the U.S. refusing to extend the New START treaty, and in that case, Russia will announce its new weapons, suggesting they already have them and they're in violation of the START treaty right now. And it also was noted that Putin mentioned intercontinental ballistic missiles in that speech. So, a little bit interesting with that. Wouldn't you say, folks? Wouldn't you say? Because you see, the thing about the New START treaty is that it's supposed to generally limit you from creating and developing any new dangerous nuclear weapons of any type, and yet Putin's saying that they're going to announce its new weapons that it already has in the present tense while the START treaty is still in effect, meaning that they've been developing and fielding, or it's to some degree, some form of new nuclear weapons that they have not disclosed and are already in violation of the START treaty. So what effect does the START treaty have if it ends, if any, because they're already breaking it right now with the START treaty still being in effect?
Yeah, I would say so.
Man, it's ridiculous, honestly. Speaking of ridiculous, a solid rocket propellant factory in Moscow also burned today as well. You can see that in this clip right here. You can hear the sound of that burning rocket fuel. That's what I should say. And that's getting kind of loud. That's like really loud. We can also see them showing it from another angle here. And the thick white smoke is showing us that it's definitely some sort of propellant fire, or what we would call an ammunition fire.
It sounds like a thunderstorm, Bliat.
But beyond that, quite a significant explosion in Moskva. There's also an ongoing drone attack in the Russian Federation currently, with Ukrainian drones spreading out throughout the entirety of southern Russia and trying to hit all of the targets that they can. Hopefully, they'll be successful. So, folks, it's now time for us to move on finally. Oh, by the way, little side note, there was a humongous earthquake down near the Horn, down near oh yeah, that is around the Horn. That's around the Horn, Mr. Christian. But that is a 7.8 magnitude earthquake near Drake's Passage, near South America today. So another major earthquake again on the Pacific Rim. Now, time to move on into the Ukraine war, because we all are fiending for a little bit of that Ukraine war news, and we got to provide it, folks, 100%. Moving us on into Kyiv, we did get to see that the Russian Federation conducted a major attack against the capital overnight, knocking out power systems throughout the city. and also landing this direct hit with a missile on the Dnipro HES hydroelectric power plant, once again showing that the Russians are directly attacking hydroelectric power plants and dams, which is incredibly dangerous considering that if the structure of the dam was to be breached or compromised, this could lead to flooding that could kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people potentially. But it does not seem that the Russians care too much, and they did directly hit the dam. We also were able to see, at least within the area around Kyiv, that the situation was quite difficult. The air defense report did come out last night, and it was decent, but it was not good enough to intercept most of the drones that caused the issues. 497 drones and missiles were fired overnight by the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainians were able to down 420 of the incoming drones and missiles. However, many of y'all who are keenly eyed will notice that about 77 drones and missiles did make it through the air defense, which, while the Ukrainians were able to intercept and shoot down a lot of the incoming targets, 77 drones and missiles making it through their targets is going to cause quite a decent amount of damage. And we were able to confirm, according to the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, he stated that the situation is difficult and that Kyiv has sustained one of the most serious attacks of the war. He says he believes there will be another Russian attack in the coming days and recommends residents stock up on water and food, prepare first aid kits, charge up batteries, and prepare warm clothes in case of the energy grid goes completely out due to these Russian attacks. It's quite clear that the Russians are trying to hit as hard as they can, especially at Ukraine's largest city, Kyiv, in the midst of the oncoming winter and the dropping temperatures throughout this region of Europe. Once again, trying to plunge millions of Ukrainians into the freezing cold, and through the terrorism of pretty much threatening them to freeze to death, trying to put pressure on the Ukrainian government to force an end to the conflict. While the Russians are attempting to do such a thing, it doesn't really appear that they're still having a high efficiency rate on getting most of their drones and missiles through. We actually were able to see this air defense footage from right outside of Kyiv, showing the Ukrainian armed forces engaging and shooting down an Iskander-M that was trying to fly towards the city. We see here locked up in the targeting camera and shot down immediately. A successful hit.
I like the police lighting that they put on the thing too when they like got a lock on it. They put like the police like a law enforcement thing over it.
Man, they said pull over. Pull over. Like,
Stop resisting! Stop resisting! Bam!
he's got a gun. Like, oh my God, he's got a knife. An acorn drops on the ground. Pop, pop. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our next bits of news, we also were able to hear down in our location unknowns of some really significant losses. Holy moly! That's a lot of troops. But Ms. DC Keeper of the Records did state that troop losses are trending over 1,000, which is good to see, and an increase in tanks and APCs, which are wonderful to hear. And it is time for us, folks, to get on into that 24-hour casualty report. 1,120 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 14 APCs, 70 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 13 artillery pieces, and 254 drones. All in all, a very good day for the armed forces of Ukraine, and it does appear that they've been holding the lines effectively and efficiently. So moving us on down into the frontline news and videos that we have, we were able to see Russian forces getting hit by the 93rd Brigade, the fighting 93rd that is, and its Signum drone unit in the area of the Seberonsky Forest. This place sure as hell is really looking like a forest right now, which usually it just looks like a field of toothpicks.
This thing right here is it's on the prowl. I guess you could say if this was a law enforcement official, they would say, stop resisting, sir. Stop resisting. Would you please come out of hiding and come out here and face the consequences, please?
Bro, why'd he turn British? What is this, a constable? Like,
he's creeping around. It's so graceful going through here. Oh, look, that's littering, sir. That's not allowed here.
Hey, you don't have authority to search my vehicle without a warrant. I don't consent to a search. You know what? You know what, buddy? F you. I'll call out the dog. You want the dog to come and smell your car? No, please. All right, then step out of the car and make this easy, then.
Oh dear, we have a fellow here who is trying to evade the law. This is not permitted. Come back here, you. Oh, don't trip. Oh,
man,
dear.
The way he was jumping over those twigs, it was like he was going for one of those famous hot dog man romp in the woods.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Oh, man. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man. Oh, look at him. He's frolicking through the woods, but not for long. The Signum unit did get him eventually. Moving on out of the Seberonsky Forest and on down towards Seversk, we also saw the Russian forces getting hit within this direction as well. It was specifically a Ural 4320, a logistics truck. And this one had a V marking on the side, letting us know it's definitely from this front. Oh, and they got it right at the rear of the cab. That was a successful hit. And moving on from that, and on further down the way and towards the Pokrovsk front, we also got to see that 2 Russian Marines were captured by the 1st Detachment of the 4th Regiment today of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Вроде нормальные типы, разговорчивые типа.
This guy has the bass-boosted voice. He went, Drovchina. Like, it's like, man.
Не кипишуйные.
Even the cough sounds sinister.
When you see the prisoner speaking here, stating a little bit about himself, he's like, "Hi, my name is Vlad. I come from Russia. I'm just scared. I have this big-ass water bottle with me. That's like a liter, at least. That's huge.
He's thirsty.
And there's the other one right here. This guy looks
They
like...
got him in that like stress position or something right there, or they got him like leaned up against a tree, like bent down like that.
Man, honestly, man, they got him in that stress position because they be stressing for real. We also saw that a Russian assault in this area was repelled within the Dobropilia direction by none other than the amazing, I believe it's the 72nd Brigade, if I'm... Actually, I think I am correct, because that is the emblem of the 1st Azov Corps. And if I am not mistaken, let me go pull up the 1st Azov here on the side screen. The 1st Azov Corps. Here we are, and let me go look at their operational brigades. And where is the airborne brigade that's attached to this? Oh crap! It's not here. What the hell? Then why did they have an airborne intro? Because it was purple. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. I don't know. At this point, I'm getting a little confused here, folks. But moving on from that, we did get to see the Russian assault attempting to move its way on up. And the Ukrainian drones, of course, are already stalking them, like the Stasi. Did you know, folks, fun fact, in East Germany, 10% of the entire population were classified informants to the Stasi. Did y'all know that?
That's crazy.
Yeah, more fun facts with the enforcer. In the meantime, the Russian assault is continuing to try and make it up the way, but the Ukrainian drones are pestering them quite heavily, hitting the sides of the vehicles and also demobilizing some of the heavier vehicles, allowing for them to be hit and destroyed later. The Russian assault still continues to press on under heavy fire as the Russians are trying to bail. We can still see them getting slammed on their motorbikes, their tanks, their armored personnel carriers, and also here within the tree lines after they abandon the vehicles. Now, I've never seen a communist red star on the side of a BMP, but this would be the first, actually, and that was a very red star. I mean, this is like the Soviet Union or something at this point. But they did slam a hit on this BMP-3, a very rare one at that, as well as a Brem recovery vehicle, and also a shed, which is a fairly common sort of a addition to the battlefield these days. We can also see Russian vehicles continuing to burn as the strikes go on. The Ukrainians making sure to slam each and every one of the Russian vehicles and personnel that they can, making sure to try and destroy this attacking unit and formation as much as they can before they're able to retreat from the front and into some sense of relative safety. We can also see another Russian motorbike getting hit. This guy tried to bail, and his motorbike still got it nonetheless. Now, see, that guy who was trying to start his motorbike, it appears that he was unsuccessful. We can see a couple of more of them trying to make a run for it, as multiple other Russian vehicles continue to be destroyed, a large amount of them being destroyed within the course of just several hours, from what we understand. These Russians are trying to stop these drones from getting him, but it just didn't appear successful. Unfortunate for them. But it does appear that the 1st Azov Corps is still doing hard work within the Dobropilia front and is still turning away the Russians. We also got to see Ukrainian FPV drones hitting and missing around the Pokrovsk area as well against the Ukrainians. And we can see that in this clip. This is a Ukrainian BTR-60, and it goes right down into the top. And we can also see another one here going into a house, demolishing it. This is showing you a little bit of a Russian perspective of the drone war. We can also see this one trying to attack that Ukrainian vehicle. This one actually appears to have skimmed the net, which means it could have bounced off, considering that the connection was interrupted. We can also see one hitting an ATV, one hitting a tree line, also one hitting a communication system. You can start to tell that the Russians' drone warfare footage is actually starting to get kind of close to Ukraine's, and it is showing that they are starting to evolve at least a little bit. It took them about 4 years, just about, to try and evolve, but they finally are starting to evolve a little bit to where they're a little bit more proficient in drone warfare. Still, it's not really giving the Russians that big of an upper hand advantage on this battlefield, as the Russians have pretty much hardly advanced at all since the collapse of the Dobropilia breakthrough several weeks ago. Moving a little bit further south, we also got to see some Russian trucks getting hit by Ukrainian drones, including this Buhanka pickup. And this Buhanka pickup be nasty. And these Russians are trying to bail, but it appears that they'll fail. That rhymes. Call me Dr. Seuss, folks. And we see that hitting the back cab, and that's the end of the clip. Very unfortunate for those Russians, indeed. Very much so, indeed. And so with that, folks, now moving out of the front lines, it's time for us to move on up into Ukraine and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1325 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Українці, українки, весь день триває відновлення після російського удару, багато роботи. Зараз вже відновили постачання електрики для більше ніж 725 тисяч сімей. Київ, Київщина, Дніпровщина, Кіровоградська область, Черкаси, Чернігів. Залишається непростою ситуація на Сумщині, також Харківщина, Херсонщина, Донеччина. Через безпекову ситуацію ремонти ускладнені. Протягом дня були нові атаки дронів, обстріли, були нові повітряні тривоги. Ще триває робота і в столиці. Де це потрібно, енергетики ввели графіки по електриці. Київ і Кіровоградська область протягом дня працювали, щоб відновити постачання води. В Києві майже відновлено, на Кіровоградщині триває запуск насосів та наповнення мережі. Завдання для всіх наших областей – підготувати достатнє резервне живлення для водоканалів. У частині громад це вже реалізовано і має бути і там, де зараз ми бачимо відповідну проблематику. Через сьогоднішній удар є постраждалі, зокрема в Києві та в областях. На об'єктах енергетики усім надається допомога. В Запоріжжі росіяни, на жаль, убили дитину. 7 років було хлопчику. Мої співчуття. Путін, очевидно, користується моментом, коли світ зараз майже всю увагу приділяє можливості встановити мир на Близькому Сході. Більшість держав світу, всі ключові лідери зосередили увагу на тому, що відбувається саме там. І це дійсно хороший шанс досягти справжнього миру після стількох жертв в тому регіоні. Це новий рекорд російської підлості саме в такий момент посилювати терористичний удар, бити саме по життю наших людей. Тільки у ніч на сьогодні було майже 500 дронів кількома хвилями, близько 200 з них – це шахеди, і також 32 ракети, і значна частина – це балістика. Відповідь на це може бути тільки одна, і це більше сили, більше ППО, щоб захистити нашу критичну інфраструктуру. І більше тиску на Росію, щоб вони реально відповідали за все, що роблять. Має бути посилення санкцій. Ми говорили про це з партнерами. Має бути повне використання російських активів, щоб посилити передусім наш захист, посилити нас, наше відновлення. І сьогодні говорив з президенткою Європейського центрального банку Крістін Лагард про фінансові можливості підтримки України. Також говорили про нашу енергетику, нашу стійкість. Була розмова у мене сьогодні з президентом Фінляндії Стубом. Він напередодні зустрічався з президентом Сполучених Штатів Америки. Ми обговорили, які наші кроки тепер, які контакти можуть допомогти захистити життя та втихомирити цього терориста в Москві. Говорив з прем'єр-міністром Британії Стармером. Ми розраховуємо на сильну британську підтримку в цих непростих обставинах. Говорили про можливу участь Британії в програмі Pearl. Це сильна програма, яка дозволяє нам купувати американську зброю. Це дуже важливо. Те, що захищає, зокрема, це ракети для патріотів. І сьогодні ж Я говорив з канцлером Німеччини Фрідріхом Мерцем, поінформував про ситуацію, про наслідки російського удару. Я дуже вдячний йому, вдячний Німеччині за системи ППО, які вже працюють для захисту України. Ми обговорили з паном канцлером російські наміри, нашу спільну можливість захищатись і захиститись. Вдячний за підтримку усім партнерам, які дійсно допомагають діями, а не просто допомагають словами. Провів сьогодні ставку, звісно, про енергетику. Це ключове питання, але були доповіді і по фронту. І в районах Добропілля наші сили зламали чергову російську спробу вдарити по наших позиціях. Я провів нараду із усіма, хто відповідає за міжнародний напрямок, уряд, голова Офісу Андрій Єрмак, секретар РНБО. Завдання чіткі, ми знаємо, які країни можуть допомогти Україні додатковими системами ППО, ракетами до них. Щодо цього потрібен саме такий результат, про який я говорив з лідерами. На рівні лідерів домовленості є у нас, потрібна робота на рівні всіх наших команд і потрібні відповідні результати. Ми знаємо, які ще країни можуть приєднатися до програми Pearl. Я очікую конкретних результатів комунікації з цими країнами, і наші дипломати мають бути ще активніші щодо цього. Третє – це санкції. Пауза без нових сильних санкцій проти Росії за війну надто затягнулася. І окремо я хочу відзначити всіх наших людей, кожного, хто від ранку працює, наших енергетиків, наші ремонтні бригади, ДСНС України, комунальні служби, всіх, хто працює, щоб повернути українським містам та селам електрику, щоб були наші люди зі світом, з водою, точно без терористів, без Москви, без війни. Потрібно бути сильними і боротись разом заради нашої держави, заради наших людей. Дякую. Дякуємо всім. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And that was the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1325 of the news from around the world. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks. Is it a fun time? Oh, you can bet your sweet baby. It's a fun time. We get to talk about literally anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. But we get to talk about everything else. And everything else is a fun time. It can include anything and everything, folks. Anything and everything. And we'll be making sure to break that down and further into detail throughout the course of the night. We'll be making sure to get to our super chats first, starting in order of the largest to the smallest, and then into our live chats, trying to make sure to get as many questions throughout the night. But we still have one last question to ask all of y'all that y'all have answered at this point. And Matthew, what are people thinking? And what are you thinking as well?
All right, so today some pretty big news came out between a meeting with the U.S. officials and the Qatari leaders, or Qatar, however you want to say. Qatar, some people say, and some people say Qatar. But the U.S. signed a deal today to allow Qatar a Air Force facility in Idaho. How do you feel about that? It looks like 39% said that's bad. It's a national security threat, while 25% said, I just don't like the sound of it, just because I don't like the sound of it. And 25% said it's fine. It's a totally normal situation. So the words, I believe it was the words of the Qatari official, I think. He used the words Air Force facility in Idaho, but there's a little bit more to it than that. The facility is to be used to train Qatari fighter pilots on the F-15 jets, so it is technically a training wing at an Idaho Air Force base here in the United States. So that's not uncommon. There are countries with training bases here already, like, for example, Singapore, the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands. So it's nothing new. But the one thing that is new, though, this is the first time that Qatar has been in the United States like that. That's the first time that's happened. But it's basically just for training. That's all it is. It sounds bad on its face, I'll admit. It sounds like Qatar is getting into our domestic stuff here on our bases, which most people would object to anyway. But it's really not that serious, although the optics are a little bit iffy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'd actually had to be with the 25%. It's generally a normal situation, but at the same time, folks, that sounds just really weird. A Air Force facility for Qatar in Idaho, even if it's for training. That sounds a little bit weird. Oh, by the way, I forgot to add this into the news. I had this on the map. Just by the way, I'm not getting political pointing this out, but I did want to point this out. The president did state today, we could show the clip, we're not because it's fairly lengthy, but the president did state that we are going to be largely rebuilding the entirety of the Middle East. And quote, it's not only Gaza, it's going to be the entire Middle East. And I just want to quickly say, folks, I just want to remind everyone here about something. We say we don't have the money to pour into Ukraine into a war to pretty much defend Europe. We also say that Taiwan is almost kind of on its own and they have to figure out that situation kind of for themselves. And then we kind of end up offshoring our situation with Iran to Israel. But when it comes to rebuilding the Middle East, now we have money. Like, I don't really know how that works, like, at least with everything that's being said elsewhere, because it's like, I generally wouldn't have a problem with that, because rebuilding the Middle East means that we're pretty much giving people significant investments and they're kind of indebted to us into the future. Not a bad position for us on a geopolitical position. But at the same time, though, how in the world do we say that and then also at the same time say that we don't have enough money to help out Ukraine in the war and the Europeans have to foot the bill? That's what I'm not really getting. Like, why in the world do we not?
Who's going to be funding it? Who's going to be funding it, though? Because they say rebuild the Middle East, but they really didn't go into the details of it. They didn't really say if the U.S. government was going to be funding it or if it was going to be the private sector that started funding it. It seemed kind of vague. To me, I took it kind of like they mean like U.S. investors are going to start building it out, not necessarily the government just handing over and forking over money to say go build some buildings or something.
I don't know. That's how I generally took it, is that it may be the U.S. government's going to start Marshall planning something inside the Middle East, because that's generally what we've done historically in the past, is that the U.S. government would get directly involved, like in financially supporting the Afghan government or the Iraqi government during the occupation and the interim government agency periods. That's what we would do back then. So I took it that way from a historical precedent, is that we are going to be taking an active role governmentally in trying to rebuild these areas. And I don't have, I'll be honest with y'all folks, my 2 cents, I really don't have an issue with that. But the thing that makes me have an issue with that, if that is the case, if I'm understanding that correctly from what I'm hearing, it's the problem that we're not doing that anywhere else. Like, why in the world are we going into the Middle East and giving the Middle East preferential treatment on everything, but we cannot give preferential treatment to our major interests that we have in Europe or in East Asia? That's what I don't really understand. And that's something that also is, it doesn't really make me too happy. And on top of that, folks, one other thing that I have to say is that wasn't this administration saying they were going to focus like inwards entirely into the United States? And then whenever it just pops up, we kind of do what we did in other periods, but only in particular instances while leaving other people behind. Like, I kind of just find that weird. It's to me, it seems like a very touch and go sort of a foreign policy thing that doesn't have a clear vision. It's more so just whatever feels the best for each region, not even on a case-by-case basis of figuring out what's best. It's just going purely off of more so emotion than anything, because there isn't really any logical end to why the Middle East would get that treatment, but the Europeans didn't have to foot the bill to support Ukraine, and then we kind of tell Taiwan they're sort of on their own. Like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, But anyways,
I just don't understand who would want to invest in that region, not because the region's nasty or something, but just because the risk of war is always so high in the Middle East. It's just the nature of the area. Like, history's shown us throughout literally the entire course of history, wars are pretty much constant in the Middle East. So if you go rebuild buildings and you start building up these nice developments, it seems like the risk is extremely high that in a couple of years they'll probably all be bombed out again once the next war starts, because it's just like there's so many different factions in the Middle East that are like vying for power. All it takes is one of them to rise up and then start fighting with, let's say, Israel again, for there to be a massive war, and then the buildings get leveled by these 2,000-pound bombs again. So the peace, like someone said just now, the peace never really lasts over there. I will say this, though. I'm kind of in the minority in this one. If the Gaza peace plan actually ends up working out, that will be historic. I will give credit for that. I personally have my doubts about it, but if it works out and Israel and the other side keeps up their end of the bargain, then that will be historic. And also, Qatar apparently played a pretty big role in that. So I don't know if it works out. I mean, peace is technically the mission here. We want peace. So if it can end up peaceful and every side adheres to it, then that will be a good thing. But the problem is, though, we know that even if the current terrorist force inside of Gaza agrees to this, there's always another faction that's willing to come in and fight that faction, take charge, and then start the war over again with Israel. So I don't know. I'm not super optimistic on it.
I would have to say I'm not necessarily optimistic on this much either. And also, on top of that, folks, here's my question. What is there even really to rebuild in the Middle East, if anything? I mean, there's not really that much. Jordan's been stable and has suffered no damage. Saudi Arabia is stable and has suffered no damage. Neither has Qatar, and that one missile hit in the middle of Al-Adid doesn't really count for much, and it hit a radome, which was ours, so that doesn't really count for them. Bahrain's taken no damage, Kuwait's taken no damage, the UAE's taken no damage, Oman has taken no damage, Yemen is still half controlled by the Houthis, so there's no rebuilding to be done there because they still want to kill us all. That's what they stated just a little while ago by sanctioning all of the U.S. Petroleum companies and their ships, quote unquote. And then really the only thing left to rebuild would be Syria, some bits of Lebanon, and then also Gaza. And it's like, why, like, I'll be honest with y'all, why in the world would we get involved in rebuilding in any of those areas? If Syria wants to rebuild, they can go and borrow money from the International Monetary Fund through the UN, like South Korea did and everyone else. If Lebanon wants to rebuild, they can do the same thing as well. I don't really know why in the world we would even put the U.S. forward to say we're going to be rebuilding at all, especially considering that Syria is a really iffy country right now with the leadership under al-Jilani, in my opinion. And also, there's definitely a high chance that Lebanon and the Gaza Strip will go straight back into its terroristic ways here within the next few years, as they historically have been doing for about the past 80 years. So I would generally say I don't really know why we want to put ourselves and our neck out on the line like that, throwing money into a situation where we might get no return out of it in the future.
Yeah, me neither. It seems a little bit sketchy, but I would personally tend to lean toward the idea that the U.S. was referring to private investments and what could be the rationale behind it. I'm trying to get in their head for a second to see where they're coming from with this plan. It seems like maybe the U.S. leadership right now believes that if U.S. investment goes into these areas, like for example the Gaza Strip and places like that, and starts to rebuild it, then maybe these terrorist forces in the region will avoid messing with U.S. investments because they think that that'll bring the U.S. force down on their heads. That might be the rationale, but the only problem is, though, it's a terrorist force. They don't use rationale like that. They're very highly ideologically motivated, and they don't care if the U.S. shows up. Most of them don't, because they're very decentralized and they fight literally from anywhere they can. So I don't think it's going to work. If that's the idea they're going for, I don't think it's going to work either. It will simply all get torn down at that point. And honestly, I will say this as well. While I am pro-Israel, we have to watch something here, because there is currently an incentive for the leadership in Israel to keep this thing going. There's some internal political issues inside of Israel right now, which may cause them to sort of want this thing to keep going. I'll be honest with you. I think the U.S. took this approach with the Gaza situation and the ceasefire and really pushed for it because of the recent attack on Qatar. I think Bibi really overextended by doing that, and it sort of pissed the U.S. off because it put our interest at jeopardy because we have an air base there at Al-Adid, and we don't want to risk that. So I think that's why the U.S. pushed for this so hard and got the ceasefire done quickly. And it was kind of going against what Bibi wanted, I think. So that kind of backfired tremendously.
I would have to agree. Maybe it was meant that we were going to just let U.S. investment firms go in. But I haven't heard any word from U.S. investment firms at this point to back that up. But at the same time, it was a bit of an ambiguous statement. It's really you can really take it either way as far as opinions go. But generally, I think I'm going to still stick with the concept for now until it's proven wrong. That, in my opinion, what was being said is that the U.S. is going to get directly involved at a governmental level in helping to rebuild the region, a lot like a Marshall Plan of a sense. That's what I was assuming, and I think I'm going to stick to my guns on that opinion for now, at least. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions at large after we got through the whole Qatari Air Forces in Idaho deal. And also in Idaho, of all places, you know, that's another interesting thing. In Idaho, like, not in the East Coast anywhere, they're pretty much all the way in the West Coast. That's a really interesting sort of a deal right there. And also, like, in Idaho, that's kind of like the crazier thing to me, folks, is that they are going to be in Idaho of all places. Like, do y'all know?
I guess when Qatar moves there, they'll have to say Idaho.
Man, bro, man, they're gonna say Idaho and I got yachts in Ohio. Like, bro, it's gonna be like, man, it's gonna be a whole new level, man. They're gonna be talking about skibbity toilet and like picking up all the Gen Z stuff. It's gonna be crazy. Also, another thing, folks, I gotta show y'all this. I really gotta show y'all this. Take a look at this. Wow. I saw this the other day. I was looking around on Google Maps. This place is really pretty. I mean, look at it. Honestly, man, I've been looking around at all of like the unknown national forests and national parks. They are gorgeous. Like they do not get the kind of appreciation that they should be getting from the general public because so many of them are honestly just breathtaking and nobody even talks about them.
Man, you gotta admit these parks are gorgeous. You gotta admit, gorgeous parks. These parks, they keep them up so nice. You gotta admit, it's like something that you would love to keep up yourself. You know, with a little bit of park service. Send them out there, refund them, rehire them, send them out there, and make sure the forest is well maintained.
I mean, honestly, man, honestly, and I mean, holy moly, folks. I mean, look at all of the different variety out here. Let me get y'all up to Glacier National Park. Look at this. I mean, this place is beautiful. I tell yous. Like, I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. Makes me want to travel the country, because you just don't really know how beautiful the country is until you start clicking around on these well, this isn't really a random one. Glacier National Park is well known, but it really makes you want to travel around and see these places because it's just awe-inspiring how beautiful these places really are. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my honest opinion, you know. And also, folks, let's see. Little Bear said, aren't they closed at the moment? Yes, they are all closed. They are all closed at the moment because of the shutdown. So, yeah, so you know that's going on at the moment. I totally forgot about that, by the way, until you brought that up, at least through the show that the government shut down, and yeah, all those parks are closed, so you can't even go into them right now. Oh, well, you know, I guess the government shutdown doesn't really affect anyone. At least that's what someone said in the Congress, and I think they don't know what they're talking about because, you know, a lot of air traffic controllers are already furloughed, and a lot of airports are having to reduce their flight schedules or just completely shut down in the meantime. So, you know, I don't know. I feel like government shutdowns generally aren't a good thing. You know, no matter who's at fault, we can all agree they're definitely not good and they definitely have an impact. So I'd have to say the person who said that, I don't really think they know what they're talking about, or they're just saying something just to say it. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the question. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving back into our super chat questions, our first one here goes to Bobby43, and thank you very much, Bobby, also known as LC39A, for that $50 support. He actually threw in two of them in a row. His first one said, Venezuela is going down.
Oh, Venezuela. I think they might be, actually. I don't know if it's a good move to do right now, but it does look like they're probably going to be going down here in the future. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, folks, if you ever go to the national parks, don't feed the bears, don't approach the meese, and don't approach those bright lights out in the forest either. Those aren't friendly. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Bobby43 yet again, and he puts in another 50. And thank you very much, Bobby, for the second massive support of the night. He said, the U.S. invading South America is a show of force to show Russia it's not for years, but for weeks.
I mean, honestly, that could be the case. That might be the case, or more so as a show of force to China, in my opinion. But still, I definitely see where you're coming from with that, and that could also be a reason for doing it, possibly. So big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that the best that we possibly can. And I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And Matthew, don't you love a beautiful national park here with limitless beauty? And then a nice big high voltage power line running right through the middle of it.
Well, see, that really grounds you, right? Like when you get near these electrical lines and stuff like that, it's important to stay grounded in nature, and it's important to stay grounded near electrical lines too.
Like, man, oh man, I gotta say, I mean, look at this, man. You know what's crazy, man? Let me check this out. That's the Grand Mesa in Gunnison National Forest, I believe. Let us measure the distance in a straight line from there to. Wow, that's only 268 miles away, or about the whole length of the state of Alabama. How in the world? How far would that be in a car? I want to measure that. Directions from here to Salt Lake to here. How far is that? It's probably going to be like 8 hours, I'd assume. Come on. It's not giving me an answer. Why are you not giving me an answer? Come on. Come on. Give us an answer. We're live on air. We're live on air. Please give an answer. Come on. It doesn't want to give an answer.
No answer for you.
No answer for me. I just wanted to find out how far it is. How far is it by car? How far is it? Like, man, I'm about to turn into that guy who went to that gas station in New York. Anyone want a hot cup of coffee? Like, start screaming it. Like, get out, man. Anyone want a hot cup of coffee? But anyways, unfortunately, we cannot find the answer to how far away that is. Anyways, with that, a huge, humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that addressed that well, and also was a little bit of insanity there. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Brian Mack 136, and thank you very much, Brian Mack, for that support, and we do appreciate that very generous $50 support right there. And he said, knowing the lore of LSA, maybe ChatGPT, are rare earth metals rare, and great work on your program, and Yahoo on 513,000 subs.
Hey, and thank you for the massive and incredibly huge support, Brian Mac 136. Hey, you know what? Let's pull it up on ChatGPT. I'll pull it up here on the side. I'll ask it the question. Are rare earth metals rare? Let's see. Here we are. Let's see. Ah, here they are. They're rarely found in high concentrations, which is actually what I explained earlier in the stream. I said that the ore deposits are usually quite thin, or you have to process a huge amount of ore to get any amount of the metal, hence making it kind of rare to find any large deposits worthwhile. Or they are incredibly hard to access because they're deep within the earth, which is actually what ChatGPT is saying right here on the side screen. And also it says that only over 70% of global production comes from China, which has advanced refining capabilities, and that creates supply risks and gives the impression that's scarce. So they're rare economically and geopolitically, but at the same time, though, if you type in, is gold rare, the answer would be no. Pretty much everything on the planet isn't really rare, because you could always make the argument, oh, no, they're not rare, because, you know, there's tons of it within the earth, it's just that we can't really reach most of it, which then makes it rare.
It makes sense now. People were getting confused. They think we were talking about they were rare earths, like they weren't cooked good enough or something like that. It's not about cooking the earth. It's not. It's some people were saying raw earths. It's not raw earths. It's not something to cook. It's rare. It's rare. It's hard to find, folks. It's something that's rare, you know, like diamonds and stuff like that. Kind of like rare. Honestly, though, here's the strategy. Like, all seriousness, right here, China has invested heavily in all these high pollution industries, like you know, extracting rare earth metals, also refining. They've really invested heavily into those industries. The U.S. really hasn't done that to a large degree. We've gone a different route. We've kind of gone the technological route to the large degree, and we've tried to be the largest in military innovation in the world. And also, we've done a fantastic job at it. That's why we have the best and most high-tech defense contractors the world's ever seen. Although they're a little inflexible, but they still produce really good stuff compared to China. That's why China copies everything we have. So I wonder which strategy will have been the better one, controlling all the like resources like China's been trying to do, or actually having very high-tech military equipment like the U.S. has. It's kind of an interesting matchup.
Honestly, it is. It's kind of like a different technological tree, a development tree. But also, I want to make this clear, because I said this earlier, and I think some people misunderstand. Nothing is rare. Like, let me put this in ChatGPT. ChatGPT. Let me put this here. Is the world running out? Let's see. Yeah, is the world running out of oil? We'll just ask it that. Is the world running out of oil? And here we go. It gives the same answer. It says the short answer is not exactly, but it's complicated. And it says we're not running out soon, but cheap oil is finite, because there is tons of oil, limitless amounts of oil inside of the earth. It's just that most of it is not accessible to us. And that is the thing that a lot of people do not know, is that it's not really about how much of it is actually within the earth, which the answer is it's quite honestly a limitless amount. We could pretty much go forever on oil if we could find a way to just easily punch into every single reserve with a straw and just start sucking it right out. The problem is is that technology currently has not advanced to make a lot of those deposits economically viable. It would cost so much money to drill to those oil deposits that they're pretty much unreachable, or it would start to make oil so expensive it's not even economically feasible anymore. Same thing with rare earths. Oh, there is a lot of rare earths in this planet, much like there is with oil. The problem is that most of it's unreachable with current technology without it becoming completely economically infeasible. And that's kind of the thing that I think some people may not necessarily know when talking about that as well. They are rare earths in the sense that there are not a lot of deposits within our reach. Just like oil right now is a finite resource that we only have a couple of more decades worth of supply based off of the current technology, drilling and extraction technologies we have right now at the moment. And within those next 30 to 40 years, y'all will see the industry, the oil industry, will come up with new drilling and extraction methods that will make other deposits that were once economically infeasible to reach possible to reach, and that will extend our oil supply a little bit farther. But at the same time, eventually, it's going to end up becoming economically infeasible to reach these deposits, and then that means that another energy source will have to be found. That's kind of what happened, at least here within the East Coast, is that mining for coal here in the East Coast was a huge industry back in the day. Massive, massive industry. Actually, it's what made a lot of states like Pennsylvania and West Virginia and so on and so forth. But the thing is that eventually it started to become so expensive to maintain those mines, the depth of the shafts, and also the length of the mine shafts here in the East Coast, that it started to become a little bit more expensive. Then that's when you saw that everyone in America moved to the Powder River Basin out there in Wyoming. That's where all the coal mining happens in the country right now, because the coal veins have never been extracted from. You can literally open pit mine the coal straight from the surface. No need for mine shafts, no need for expensive mine shaft maintenance, a whole bunch of safety protocols that you have to do when working in an underground mine. It's an open pit mine, so the safety regulations are a little bit more lax, and that means that generally it's a lot cheaper to operate those sorts of mines. And so that is another big thing that people have to keep in mind, is that it's not like I think that's where people always get lost with it. Rare earths are rare because we do not have an ability to extract most of it from the planet. We only have an ability to extract a small amount of it right now, and that's what we currently see being traded around the world, bought and sold in different countries. Most of it is inaccessible to us with current technologies and mining and extraction methods. And so I do thank you massively for support, and you are correct. In the greater sense of things, in the abstract sense, rare earths are not rare at all, but they are rare for us to reach. And so I hope that does address it the best I can. A humongous thanks to you for the support, and also a really interesting topic to talk about. And also Andrew Honeycutt just asked, have you ever heard of the Battle of Blair Mountain? Oh, yeah. And if we have time for a rabbit hole on that later, Matthew, save that one as a live chat. I want to get into that one because that's actually a very interesting story. But anyways.
Save what now? Save what?
Andrew Honeycutt's question, ever heard of the Battle of Blair Mountain? It's actually a really cool rabbit hole. So with that, I hope that addresses that well. Humongous thanks to you, though, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Brian. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Andrew Barbro, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that $50 support right there. We do appreciate that. And Andrew said, we are lucky. We understand that only half we see is real, and the other half is the BS that they try to feed to us.
Oh, buddy. Oh, you're right. I gotta be straight up, Andrew. We are lucky that we are only generally covering what we can very much verify here on this channel every night, because there is so much stuff that people put out there that just is not even close to being real. So many people put out stuff out there that is just untrue. And when a lot of people say that misinformation is a big issue in the modern day, I'd have to say so, because the amount of people who listen to stories, because people generally like to believe stuff at face value, and I think that that's a very understandable sort of a thing. Like earlier tonight, someone asked, did Xi Jinping have a stroke? There are so many people going with that story right now. Like, I don't at all say that that was a stupid question to ask. It's a great question to ask because everyone's going with that story, but it's one that we have no proof for, and people are just running with it so that they can get a good headline, knowing that it's most likely not even able to be backed up with any sort of verifiable fact. And it's just really a shame that there are so many people out there who really prioritize virality over accuracy, because of course here on this channel we generally go viral, like by most metrics, every day. But we make sure that our news is heavily accurate and heavily sourced. And on top of that, we make sure that our titles are as accurate as they can possibly be. I mean, when a lot of y'all know, if you read a title and we say that something's happened, it's happened. Like when the U.S. bombed Iran, it happened. When the U.S. is going to strike Venezuela and it's imminent, it happens tomorrow. We make sure that everything that we say is 100% verifiably sourced and accurate. But a lot of people do not. And I've got to say that I just heavily encourage y'all, listen to these words and follow them to a T. If someone does not have verifiable proof to back up their story, whatever they're telling you the news is, generally the safest thing to assume is that that story is most likely not true. And also, if a story sounds too good to be true, then it's most likely not true. Like, for example, Xi Jinping is being overthrown. That's clearly not happening right now. We would be hearing about that all around the world if that was happening. And there would be a lot of signs in China that that is happening. If, for example, the Ukrainians hijacked a train in Russia, there would be a million examples of proof, video, picture evidence, something along those lines, to be able to confirm that that happened, and yet there was none. So I just got to say, like, I would agree with you definitely, Andrew Barbaro. Half the stuff out there is generally untrue, and I hope that people are very careful in listening to stories and taking them as fact and understanding the world through that lens, because a lot of that lens could be mostly untrue. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I got a correction. As Ted said, I'm calling BS. I'm a coal miner in Pennsylvania. The Powder River Basin is a different sulfur content of coal, and both underground and above ground mines have the exact same rules for safety per MSHA. And I thank you for sharing that, because from what I've been told, I had actually been told that the mine shafts actually had less safety, well, not mine shafts, but the open pits had less safety regulations than the underground pits. That's at least what I had heard. But if you're an actual coal miner from Pennsylvania, I'll take your word for it, because you're in the trade and the industry, and it's not just someone telling me that someone said to them this, that, and another. But a huge thanks to you for sharing that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So our next one here is going to go to none other than Jay Bagwell. And Jay Bagwell, thank you very much for that $20 support, and also helping to keep the channel running. It's good to see you once again. He said, great stream, guys, and check out the new FNMTL-30 multi-purpose launcher. It shoots 30mm grenades or specialty anti-drone rounds.
Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Yes. Oh my goodness. Man, this thing is chonky. Look at it.
Damn, that thing is really, like, that looks like an automatic shotgun almost, like the way it's set up.
I'm not going to lie, though, that FN logo is clean.
That is clean. I can only imagine how much this costs.
Sadly, I can't show the price because of reasons. But beyond that, I got to say, this is a really interesting looking sort of a deal right there. Really interesting, actually, I gotta say. But I do thank you incredibly for sharing. Actually, let me go look at it off screen here really quickly. The MTL-30. I'll give you a little bit of information about it from their website. Designed and manufactured in the U.S., the FNMTL-30 multi-purpose tactical launcher 30mm is a soldier portable, semi-automatic, medium-velocity, flat trajectory grenade launcher that enables warfighters to engage targets in multiple ranges with more effective payloads over existing technology. This is a robust solution for close combat and long range, out to 500 meters. The FNMTL-30 is chambered for 30mm medium-velocity grenades and features a detachable box magazine with 3 or 5 round capacity. At just 35 inches in length and 8.5 inches tall, the weapon weighs just over 10 pounds. Dang, that is actually crazy. Let's see. Huh. And it's got an effective range of 500 meters. That's like average firefight distance. Actually, that's a little longer than average firefight distance. Average firefight distance is 400 meters. So that's actually pretty decent. You could actually use this thing in a normal firefight to a degree. But that's actually really interesting. A semi-automatic 30mm grenade launcher. And I'd have to say, I would suppose that thing would be quite effective, really, especially against drones. And I got to thank you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep it running, and also sharing this beautiful masterpiece of grenade launcher that FN's making. And hopefully that'll be able to help out in the drone war scenario, at least for FPV drone defense for infantry units. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And of course, thank you for being a friend of the channel and the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Terry Strife, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Terry, as well, for that support. They said Ukraine needs to be added to the EU and NATO. And I've been sending an email to all NATO countries, and I'm the only voice. And please take a little of your time of your day and send an email out to NATO countries asking Ukraine to be added EU to NATO. Honestly, Terry, like I do agree with you. Ukraine should be, I think Ukraine will get into the EU, honestly. I think they have a pretty good chance of that. But getting into NATO, that's a whole nother thing. I would say the odds of Ukraine getting into NATO are probably slim to none, to be perfectly honest. I hate to be like the bearer of bad news with that, but Ukraine will probably not get into NATO in the traditional sense. But they will basically be de facto NATO, kind of like they are right now to a large degree, because the U.S. is still funding them tremendously, and they're getting tons of aid. So I would say they're benefiting from it without necessarily being a traditional member of it. But the EU, I would say it's a good chance. But they got to work on a couple things with the corruption stuff, though. They still got to get that under control. They're still trying to root that out. But once they get that sorted, they'll be good to go. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support, and I definitely agree with you. Ukraine should be in the EU and NATO, but I also have to agree with Enforcer Matt. The NATO path of ascension is going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for Ukraine to achieve. However, the EU path is quite easy and very much beneficial to the Ukrainians. However, one thing I would say is that emailing all of these countries might not be the most effective way to go about it, because most countries are going to throw a comment into the bin if it's not from someone that directly pertains to them. The best way to do it, especially if you're an American citizen, is to directly speak to your congressional representatives at the federal level within the House of Representatives and the Senate. So you'll want to find whoever's in charge of your constituencies, your senator or representative, or your representative is the best way to put it, and then email them what your thoughts and opinions are and let them know that you are actually a constituent within their district. If you're from another country, you kind of repeat the same process, but for your government. So in Britain, you would go and contact your member of parliament. In France, you would go and contact your member of the National Assembly. In Germany, your member of the Bundestag, so on and so forth, and let them know. Because unfortunately, voices from foreign countries generally, and even from outside of someone's constituency, really aren't listened to a great deal in the bigger sense of things. They're usually ignored because it could be anyone, and generally they are looking for what is in the best interest of their country or what their country would want. Because the thing is that while you're saying that, how these countries will look at it is that, yes, they would agree with you, but if they make that decision and it's not popular with the public within their country, you might have just cost that person an election, and you didn't even have a say in whether they were going to be reelected again. That's usually how a lot of them would look at it. So I definitely agree with what you're doing, but I would make sure to focus the efforts specifically on speaking to your direct elected representatives in whatever country you're in that are right above your head, and talking to them, because they are going to have the most power in making sure that they will be able to get Ukraine into the European Union, or definitely knowing for sure that if they're already in support of that, their constituents are behind them and also supporting them in that decision. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also I hope that helps you to have a great deal of progress, if you're not already having great progress, in making sure to let folks know that you're definitely in support of that sort of a move. And also I'd encourage a lot of folks to speak directly to your elected representatives, especially your representative or your senator, about those sorts of deals, or if you're in another country, your equivalent of a representative or a senator, because it is incredibly important to let them know what their constituents are thinking, so that way they can hopefully try and gear themselves up for a re-election, or if they go against your interests, you know who to vote for next, which is not them. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Blito3WOT, who puts in a $20 donation as well. And thank you very much, good sir, Blito, for that support and also helping to fund our work. Because like we always say, like a broken record almost, it is that support that keeps us on the air. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 20 from Jeff Siebert. And Jeff Siebert said, "Blessed be the peacemakers."
Oh yeah, I would agree. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Friend Wilkins. And thank you very much, Friend, for that 20 as well. He said this one's long overdue.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. There's no such thing as support being long overdue. Whenever people want to support this channel, we are more than happy with it. And whatever amount people want to support it, we are more than happy with that too. Because the truth of the matter is, folks, is that this stream runs absolutely free of charge. No money is made on this thing outright through ads or sponsors, and also no money is made through the viewers. We never expect any money to be made by the viewers supporting the channel. It's always a great blessing and a fortune that you'll enjoy this channel enough to support it even with $1, at least in our opinions. So I got to thank you massively for support. I don't think it's long overdue at all. I think it's exactly the amount that it should be, and I thank you incredibly for that support and helping this channel to keep rolling, because it's folks like you who make this channel possible and keep this thing rolling every day. You help us to be able to pay our bills and, keep doing this as our full-time job, and we're massively appreciative of you. So humongous thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Uptown Dunk. Or Dunk is, let me go check that real quick. I think I might have missed a letter. Let me go check. Let's see here. Uptown Dunk. It is Uptown Dunk. At first, I'll be honest with you. I thought it said Uptown Drunk when I first read it. I was like, Uptown Drunk. I'm like, surely it doesn't say that. It says Uptown Dunk. My eyes are deceiving me. But thank you very much, Uptown Dunk, for that $20 support. He said, does the emerging trade war justify discussion? And do we hold the cards over China? And no rare earth, no chips, no TSMC, no NVIDIA. And market depends on AI revolution. Does the U.S. economy too? And who wins on the money war? And when Taiwan invasion, who wins? LOC. Honestly, Uptown Dunk, you're definitely onto something there. The trade war is really, really tricky. It's a lot more fragile than people would think. And right now, here's my analogy I use for it. We're approaching this very fragile problem like a glass table, and we're taking a sledgehammer and we're putting dents in the glass and hoping the whole thing doesn't shatter. That's what we're basically doing right now, and it's very, very precarious. So, while me personally, I think China has way, way too much influence over the U.S. economy, you can't just separate that overnight. So they do have cards over us, and we do have some cards over China as well. But I would say on the economic front, I think they have some more cards over us than we have over them, me personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to actually say that is a lot of questions. Very good questions, but a lot of them. I'm going to try and answer each of them the best I can, but short answers for each. Generally, this is a very fragile situation. And like Matthew said, generally we're dealing with it with a sledgehammer. We need to be quite fragile with this because, I do have to make this clear to folks, China is America's #1 adversary. They are also an incredibly important trading partner with how things have generally turned out these days. So we really cannot just slam them around, because when we slam them around, it hurts us. We could slam the Russians around all day and it would not hurt us a bit in an economic sense or really a military sense. We can't really say that with China. So we have to kind of deal with China with white gloves for now and then take those gloves off later when we have to. So I would generally say they are kind of holding the cards because of the rare earths. I'd also say that eventual war with China is probably highly likely because they're most likely going to try and retake Taiwan. And I would also have to say that the semiconductors are important. And now that the Taiwanese are refusing to move the semiconductor production to the United States, that's a do or die sort of a hill down there for strategic and economic reasons. We have to defend Taiwan at this point as an assured guarantee. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to hear great questions like that as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Paul Weekly. And Paul said, a 1 drone per soldier kill ratio is not financially sustainable.
Actually, it is, crazily enough. One FPV drone costs about, if I'm not mistaken, about 800, actually, these days in Ukraine, I mean, it's just a couple of dozen of dollars. That Russian soldier is quite expensive, actually. The amount of tax expenditures on a citizen as they grow through the years is usually tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in America. In Russia, it's about tens of thousands of dollars. Then on top of that, the equipment that guy's carrying is quite expensive. That guy's rifle crazily enough in Russia, is probably about the same value of that drone. So using a drone to even just blow up one AK, that's a 1-to-1 expense ratio already. Blowing up a guy with a helmet on, that's adding additional value. The bulletproof vest, the backpack, the amount of cost it took for him to grow up and become a capable citizen to serve in the military, that's also a huge amount of value lost. To be honest with you, hitting a single soldier with an FPV drone, when we're speaking about the value of a soldier, just from the monetary side of things and looking at it in that sort of a pragmatic sense, it actually is economically feasible, crazily enough. You wouldn't think it is, but when you actually break down the costs and the figures, it actually is. But still, I hope...
Honestly, I hate to think of it like that. Like, it just sounds so, like, I know that's how you have to analyze it from a war perspective, but it just sounds so, like, crass. It sounds, that's the nasty part of war. Like, it really is that nasty. It sounds that way too. That's just unfortunate. When you really think of it like that, it's really, really tough.
Yeah, it's tough. I've got to be honest with y'all. Sorry if I came off sounding really calculated about this sort of deal. We just deal with this every day. So, getting asked a question like that, we just go through the analysis and the math of it all and completely remove the fact that that's a person getting killed. But outside of that, that is, I got to be honest with y'all. If y'all haven't been cued in yet, war is quite a nasty business in every direction. Really, global affairs in foreign policy is quite a nasty business. I don't know if a lot of people catch on to that, and probably many of you keen folks have, but some people who may not have. It is a very nasty affair. One, with what we have to do, like people saying, it's wrong to go down into Venezuela. I mean, sure, but if we have to do it, we have to do it, whether it's a good-looking thing or not. Sometimes you just have to do some things. Although I don't think we should still be doing that now. There's a whole bunch of other things to do. But when it comes to actually calculating stuff in a military sense, especially when we're this removed and we're not speaking at a company commander level or a platoon level or a squad level or a fire team level, we're not talking about people as in people. We're talking about people as in numbers. This is actually the same sort of talk that you would hear generals make. And it's not because they're crass, and it's not because they don't care about the lives, but their job is to figure out how to get the nation and its millions of people as little individual, minuscule, uncountable units through the war the best they possibly can. It's a really sort of a wild and bizarre thing when you take a step back and talk about it. But it's wild. Actually, Matthew, speaking of something wild about that, here's a crazy fact for you. In the First World War, U.S. soldiers were told that if a gas attack happens from the Germans, the first thing they were to do, if a horse was nearby, was to go over and put a gas mask on that horse before they put a gas mask on them. And every officer told those men, a horse is more valuable than 10 men. So if it takes 10 men to go put a gas mask on that horse, that's what's going to happen first before anyone else puts a mask on. Because if we lose a horse, it's more valuable than 10 of you men.
Yeah, you can't put a gas mask on an AK, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you can't put one on an AK, but it's a fairly sort of a crass thing, war is, especially when we talk about the actual calculatory side of things like that. But to get this thing full circle, it actually is economically feasible to take out one Russian soldier with an FPV these days. But a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bobby43 yet again, and he puts in yet another 50 Canadian support.
Hey!
And a huge shout to you, Bobby, for, I believe it's the third super chat of the night. We do appreciate that very much. He said the price of a drone versus the price of a human. Honestly, it's a morbid way to look at it, but unfortunately, that is the way it has to be looked at in war. That's why war's not preferable, because it gets nasty like that. It takes the humanity out of everything, and it turns into a mechanical process of just basically just taking people out, which is really terrible. So yeah, it really is like that. And also, by the way, like I have to say, like over the course of time, like we do get desensitized over time, but I still have a lot of sympathy for the people in this war that just have to fight in it because that's what their orders are. They have to be put into the meat grinder. It's a horrible situation. Most people try not to focus on it because obviously we can't help the circumstances. The war will continue no matter how we feel about it, but it's just so tough. Like these people have families and stuff like that. Some people want to be on the front lines and some people don't. So it's just tough. War's hell.
Yeah, it's a pretty nasty sort of a deal, and it's really a crazy sort of thing when someone says something like hitting a single person with a drone is not economically viable. And I mean, on the face of the value, that's a very decent assessment or an assertion. And then we go, well, actually, no, it's not. And then we start going through the actual costs. It's really wild when you think about it, because war is truly unsavory sort of an affair, as has been put in the past by others in centuries of before. Because you sit there and you have to almost end up becoming inhuman. You have to remove the human from the element and just come down to some sort of a calculating, pragmatical sort of an assessment of a situation. How many men will die? How much equipment will be lost? How much does this cost? How much equipment will have to be given? How much will it cost to bring the equipment here and the supplies to keep these men going? What about the attrition from disease or other sorts of afflictions? How many of them will go home wounded? How many of them will go home and be mentally broken? You have to factor all of that in, not as a human sort of an assessment, but as a mathematical equation, which is a really sort of a crazy thing to think. We used to not think like that a great deal just off of the bat. Like when a question like that's asked, we would just shoot out an answer, and it's, just looking at it from the pragmatic sense. Back in the earlier part of the war, in the war in Ukraine, well, in his first year, you would always think about the human element because it was fresh and new. But after doing this for 3.5 years, it's just like at this point, we just kind of accept it as a fact of life. This is what it is. And actually, funny thing, the Confederate General Robert E. Lee actually is famously known for saying the quote, I think he said it, it's a good thing that wars are terrible, lest we would grow fond of them. And I would have to say that's definitely the case. Hopefully people will never become, well, I don't think people are fond of war now or ever will be. War is a horrendous thing, a necessary evil most of the time, but a horrendous thing nonetheless. But a big thanks to you for the support, Bobby, and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Interstate Chef, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. And he said, hello, enforcers. 2 things. Maybe Qatar will go to Mountain Home Air Force Base. And also, I think that's where they're heading, by the way. That's where they have their air wing built. But they said also, if the U.S. Secured Ukraine's rare earth metals combined, would it make a dent in what China has?
Actually, it wouldn't. Ukraine has a decent amount. Also, here's the Mountain Home Air Force Base, by the way, right here. And I'll show you all where that is, relative in Idaho. It's down here, south of Boise. So, now that we know where that base is and where the Qataris are going to be, I hope they have fun there. It doesn't look like there's a lot around, really. It looks like they're in the middle of nowhere. But beyond that, now that we've gotten that out of the way, Matthew, can you reread the other part of that question so that way I can get back on track here?
Yeah, he was basically asking, he said, if the U.S. secured Ukraine's rare earth metals combined, do you think it would make a dent in what China even has?
Unfortunately, it really wouldn't. Ukraine is not does not have a massive amount of rare earth deposits within their territory. There is a decent amount, but it's nowhere a massive amount. So while it will help, it's not going to replace completely or even entirely or even a fraction of the amount of Chinese rare earths that were present within the trading or the trade that we were conducting with the Chinese. So unfortunately, the answer to that would be no. But I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've also got a 20 from Andrew Barbaro. And thank you very much, Andrew, for the second support of the night. He said, the truth is the most important element in your life.
And can you reread that one again?
That was a tough one. That one didn't land right there. I'm just joking, by the way. But Andrew said, the truth is the most important element in your life.
And I would have to agree. I'm sorry. I actually saw Andrew Honeycutt correcting my quote and getting it exact. And I was like, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
But beyond that, I would have to say, yes, truth is a very important sort of a thing. And you know, folks, I got to say something here really quickly, folks. This is something that is very important to remember. Opinion is not truth. If you think that something is the case, and you just think it, and there's no facts behind it, it's an opinion. And that is not the truth. And a lot of people get that mistaken, especially here in America in domestic politics. They believe that their political opinions are factual truths, which is never the case. And that's also why I always say here on the channel, there's really no such thing as a correct political opinion, because it's an opinion, and there is no such thing as a correct opinion. Now, there could be opinions that are a little bit well deduced or more deduced than others, or a little bit more logical, but no such thing as a perfectly correct one. And so,
well, there are certainly wrong ones. I can tell you that. I mean, there's certainly definitely wrong ones. History has shown us what the wrong political takes are, and some of them are horrific, like communism and things like that.
But the thing is, though, is that while that would seem like that's the case, is it like not to like sit here and like start like upturning the whole world and everything, but is it really wrong? Like
What, communism?
Yeah, because well, I'm not saying I'm a communist or anything, but the thing I'm saying is that by our opinion, communism is completely wrong. By other people's opinions, communism is the only way forward.
I mean, that may be what they think, but history shows that communism has a very, very fast burnout rate as a form of governance and also an economic policy. It doesn't have a very good run rate. The capitalist system might have a expiration date on it, but at least it's had a much longer run rate than communism or any type of governance like that has ever had on it.
But I'd say that you could actually make an argument that capitalism has failed in some instances, like with the Dutch VOC or with the French Land Bank under John Law. There have been instances where forms of capitalism have just almost failed outright. John Law's Land Bank, which was a capitalist system, failed within, I think it was about 4 months from its inception to its end, and literally skyrocketed the French economy to be the largest one in the world, and then collapsed it into absolute despotism within 4 months. And so I would actually say, really based off of anyone's opinion, you could really argue till the cows come home, anything for that matter, even if communism is a good sort of an economic system or not. By our opinion, by my personal opinion, I'd say the communism is one of the worst economic systems that's ever existed. I mean, I really think that the facts would generally show that, but still, there are some people out there who could argue and have a pretty staunch opinion that the communist system is a good system. And generally, when you look at it, removing our subjective opinion from it, there really is not a right answer to really any opinion.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess you could say that is true. An opinion is something that can't be proven true or false. So, I mean, technically, an opinion can't be wrong. But in my opinion, there are factual statements you can make about these different governance systems. Like with communism, we can say for a fact that it does not always last as long as capitalism does, and also democracy. It doesn't last as long. That's been proven throughout history. So you can say that is a factual statement. But whether or not communism is good or bad, I guess that could be an opinion. In my viewpoint, though, I would say that it's been proven not to work and shown that it really doesn't hold up well. It's not resilient as a system. So, I mean, that's just what I think. Now, some people are about to say, well, I mean, the United States is proof that capitalism and democracy has its limits. I would say you're not wrong, but at the same time, though, what's your alternative? I mean, if you say it's wrong or you say it's not working, then what is your alternative? You can't say communism because communism has been proven to be a much weaker alternative to capitalism. So we have to have a solution in order to replace the current thing that's currently going on. So I just don't see it.
Yeah, I would say that I would say that in my opinion, communism is a stupid economic system. But at the same time, taking a step back from my own opinions on that matter, you could argue anything, and you could generally have a point to it. Now we could say facts, like the Soviet Union, which was a communist nation, did collapse. It was actually a Marxist-Leninist nation. Here, someone's about to say that in a second. It was actually Marxist-Leninist, which is a form of communism, and it did collapse. And so, you could use that as a fact. That is a fact that then could support an opinion that communism sucks because the Soviet Union collapsed, which was a communist economic and governmental system. But still, at the same time, people use facts to create opinions here in America endlessly on political topics. And really honestly, folks, when you look at stuff like history, for example, because a lot of people like to make clear examples out of history, and this is kind of what I'm basing my statement off of right here. People come up with their opinions, which they state as fact on history. Like for example, the like let's say this one. This one's one that actually is a little controversial and is actually debated a little bit to this day. Is that the United States conducted an endless expansion westwards against the Native Americans, which did nothing to the settlers or the colonials, for that matter, to cause them to treat the Native Americans with any form of hostility. When you look at that in a historical lens, it was just a bloody battle between the two ever since the settlers arrived in America. Like if you actually look at it historically, there were endless amounts of wars between the Native Americans and the settlers, pretty much from their first arrival at the Jamestown town colony. It was especially for the English settlers here in the Americas since about, I think it was 1609, if I'm not mistaken. And up until that point, if you really look at it, sometimes the settlers would end up being the ones provoking on the Native Americans. The other times it would be the Native Americans provoking on the settlers. And then some people will go and cherry pick the facts out of that whole story and then make it sound like the Native Americans were just, warmongers, or make it sound like the settlers were warmongers, pushing for endless expansion or pushing the settlers back into the East Coast or into the sea. And the truth of it is that it's a huge gray area if you really look at it for what it is. It was just endless war and strife like there's always been through history, and there really is no clear good or bad side involved in that. But still, people will come up with a good or bad side because they will cherry pick specific facts and instances to make up a fact that's more so an opinion based off of facts to support a claim. And that honestly is the reason why I would say, and there's endless examples that I could give of that. That's just the quickest one I could think of. But I would say that there are endless examples like that in any facet, especially in American politics, where people will cherry pick facts to create what sounds like a strong opinion until you consider the totality of all facts, and then it becomes a significant gray area, and it's really just up to your own preference on what you would think.
Yeah, I would say so, honestly. Also, by the way, not to just jump off of this real quick, but Bobby43 put in a super chat right this second on this topic. A $50 super chat, by the way. And a huge shout out to you, Bobby, for throwing that in right there. And just to go ahead and call this off right now, he said communism is great for the leaders.
Oh, yeah.
And Bobby is 100% right. Communism is great for the leadership, not great for the people. Here's the basics around communism, just to cover this really quickly. It's a one-party rule and state control over society, meaning there's one party and the state controls everything. So that's already a huge red flag, in my opinion. It also has an official ideology that guides the entire state that you cannot deviate from. You must adhere to it. Also, it has a centrally planned economy where the government controls production and distribution. So they control the means of production, meaning there is no competition, which is a huge problem because competition breeds better products. And in communism, you don't have that competition. So it's a huge problem as well. They also abolished private property, and the state owns all the means of production, like I mentioned. And they have the goal of achieving a classless society, which removes all motivation from a society to actually move forward and actually progress as one big country. That removes everything. All the motivation has been basically stripped from that country under communism. So that's why it doesn't work. And also imagine this. Imagine a government running every means of production. I mean, that's insane. As you can see how our democratic government runs stuff. It runs stuff terribly when the government runs something. It runs awful. Imagine the government running every major manufacturer in the country under the state. Oh my God. You can only imagine how bad that would be. So bad.
That's socialist, like the heavy industries and the major industries being operated by the state. Communism is every single business being operated by the state, even down to like a small bakery within a single block. It would still be operated and functioned by the state as a part of some sort of a collectivized baking chain or a nationalized baking store system. It's a really crazy sort of a system, communism. One thing I will say that is a clear fact about communism that makes it bad is that communism does not inspire ingenuity or creativity. And that is something that is an opinion. That is actually a historically proven fact. Because if you look at any communist country in history, except for China, and that's because China uses a hybrid capitalist economic system in the modern day, so they're the only outlier. Every single communist country does innovate, but at such a slow pace, it is nowhere close to what a capitalist system does. Capitalist systems breed innovation, and capitalist systems, because they prioritize the individual over the collective, allow for patents and copyrights, which inspires creativity and ingenuity because the original creator or idea, I guess you say intellectual, is able to hold rights and benefit from their creation, whatever it may be. In a collectivized communist sort of a system, nobody has any benefit for innovation. They do not ever reap the benefits of their own labors or creativity or production. It is always something that is absorbed by the state. So innovation has to be compelled or forced by the state, and even still, the productivity is quite low. Another thing that we could say that is a fact about this, about communist systems, is that collectivized farming is much more inefficient than privatized land plots, and that is also something that's statistically proven. Funnily enough, a North Korean corn scientist actually proved that one, and then he almost got put in prison in North Korea for going against Juche ideology because he found it out. But he was, to explain this to y'all, this guy is actually a defector, and he was a corn scientist. And if y'all don't know, corn is huge in North Korea because the great leader says it is, because corn is it's a holdover from the Khrushchev era when they first came into power. But Khrushchev believed that corn was the future. And it was a huge calorie creator. It was easy to grow. That was at least the theory. It's not easy to grow. So the North Koreans have been huge into developing genomes of corn that are resilient. And crazily enough, Matthew, what this North Korean scientist said, and this is actually quite shocking, is that while North Korea sucks at most everything, the genomes and the best way to say it, I think it's like the spurgote or the sperm within the cells of within the kernels of the corn that, of course, grow the corn stalks, they're actually as resilient as the corn seeds and sperm zygotes, all that stuff that would be found inside of the corn kernels that are produced by Monsanto and other companies in the United States. One of the few areas that they've actually excelled in because most of the national effort is put into it. So this guy ended up conducting a test, and this was back in the 80s, so, his information might be dated by this point. But they conducted a test. And they tried to figure out what is the most efficient way at producing the highest yields per hectare. And it turns out that privatized plots, according to his test and his empirical results, produced 10 times. It was a 1,000% increase in crop yield. It's actually gymnosperm, something like that. But beyond that, it produced a 1,000 increase in yield per hectare of corn. And he published his results inside of North Korea, and then he was arrested and put on trial for anti-revolutionary ideology. And so they actually let him off because he said he was just a stupid, a reckless scientist. He said something stupid. He didn't really mean it, and they let him go. But that's what started him on his path to defection. He's like, these people are stupid. I just said a fact, and then they almost put me in prison for it. So then he defected. But that's actually another empirical fact about communism, not an opinion. That is something we can definitively say by multiple tests and also historical precedent out of the statistics that are compiled. Collectivized farming is not as beneficial or produces as high a yield as privatized land plots. So I would say...
Honestly, when you have an economist come up with your governance structure, and at the core of communism is Marxism, at the core of it, and he's an economist, by the way. Karl Marx was an economist. So when you have someone like that, who's an academic, who is very, very caught up in the textbook and doesn't understand how it works in real life, basically, and they put forth their ideology, which becomes communism, and then a state tries to inject it, like the USSR did, into an entire country, it doesn't work. Because the problem, here's my main problem with communism. This is one of the the crux of the whole issue, basically, is that the economists didn't factor in the psychology of the people. Yes, everybody technically can be taken care of under communism, and everybody can be equal. But what do humans want? They need hope, and they want hope, and they need it too, in order to be successful and also progress toward a common goal. They need hope. If you're fighting for mediocrity, which is what basically you're fighting for in communism, you don't really have any motivation to move forward and progress as a person, and therefore take your society to the next level. The citizens don't move forward. They stay at the same level. It's mediocrity. So that's a huge problem right there to me, because once that starts happening, the citizens start becoming complacent. They become very, very not resilient at the same time as well. So that's a huge problem. Like, the psychology of communism simply doesn't work in itself. If you put all the other issues aside in the whole structure, that's one of the main problems.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a lot like John Law's land bank. Have you ever read, Matthew, about John Law's theory of a land bank?
Not really, no.
It's a really interesting read, but he actually brought it into being because of a regency council that came into existence after the death of King Louis XIV. And in the midst of the regency council, he had a friend, and his friend, the Duke of Orleans, was like, yeah, you know what? Try out the land bank. This sounds like a cool idea. And it blew up. I mean, like, it was insane. I think for a second, it almost got as big as the Dutch VOC during that period. and it exploded. But the problem is that it was almost like a Ponzi scheme of a sort, because right after it exploded, it literally imploded in about the same period of time. It rose the French economy out of its national debt and then crashed the whole thing literally 2 months later. And it was insane. I was actually reading about it and watching some documentaries on it, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, that was a great economic theory on paper, but a terrible implementation in real life, because there was a load of flaws with the idea. But crazily enough, if y'all don't know, John Law's land bank is actually one of the very first economic systems that was based generally on a faith system, a faith-based currency backing system, instead of a gold or silver-based backing economic system. So that's something of an interesting fact about it, because as many of y'all will know, the U.S. Currency isn't backed by gold; it's backed by faith and good credit, and so it's not really backed by anything. It's just backed by people's belief that it has value. And crazily enough, the land bank notes that were being issued by I think it was Le Banque Royale or something like that, were also just backed by faith and good credit. But back then, it wasn't
That's
really a
true.
thought-out theory.
That's true. And also, by the way, I see some people mentioning why they think communism is so weak, and why they think it's. Some people are saying maybe there's some good elements to it. Here's the thing: there's a trade-off when you're trying to like structure a government. There's a trade-off you have to make. You have to determine: do you want your government to be more efficient and more effective, or do you want to lean toward the side of more personal freedoms and more, I guess you could say, ways for people to be independent? Because you can't have them both. For example, let's take China for an example. China was really, really communist until they started like this hybrid, like capitalism, communism system that they have right now, which is kind of strange, but it works for China. But China has a very effective economy. It's obviously having trouble right now, but I would say every economy on the planet is having trouble right now. It's not really unique to one country. Even the U.S. is struggling right now, so it's not unique to China. But their system is pretty effective at what it is. But you don't really have any personal freedoms in China. That's the problem. They decided to go the route of, let's have less personal freedom and let's have a more straightforward and efficient government system, which has worked in its own right, but it leads to a bad quality of life, in my personal opinion. And meanwhile, the U.S. has generally leaned toward more personal freedoms and a less efficient government. It's also worked for us, but we're also running into some problems in the modern day with that, because we're seeing that there's some shortcomings to it that, if are exploited by the wrong type of people, then it might turn into a big problem and it might screw up the whole system. Not pointing fingers at one individual person, by the way. It's multiple people that have led to that. But I would say generally, I would rather have more personal freedoms, me personally, than have a super efficient government. That's just me.
Also, I see some people saying there is absolutely nothing positive to communism. I would generally agree. But let me be the devil's advocate here for a minute, and I will say two things that I could point out that generally a lot of people would say were true, that lived through the post-Soviet era or the post-communist era throughout Eastern Europe. A lot of people have said that came out of the post-Soviet era that living in a communist system was very easy compared to a capitalist system. You didn't have to worry about bills. You didn't have to worry about anything. You showed up at the job. You were in an appointed apartment. You had a basic food income that you were allotted, and the little bit of money that you made wasn't used on any necessities. It was just expendable income to buy whatever you wanted, if it was even available. Another thing that you could also say is that a communist government system, or any sort of an authoritarian government system, and this is something that's kind of a bit of a double-edged appeal that's being used nowadays in propaganda, because they're authoritarian, they can put down the boot on people's faces to pretty much quell any form of public disturbance. And so it always looks extremely peaceful in any authoritarian state. Like, for example, China. People go, look, there's no crime here. There's no vagrants in the streets. No one you got to be scared of on the subways. It's great. And that's what they use in the propaganda nowadays. And you can actually point out those two things as generally being the appeals or benefits of some form of an authoritarian state. But it's like, at the same time, though, some people, by their opinion, would say that completely justifies some form of an authoritarian system. But others would say that that is definitely not any benefit of an authoritarian system, and a more individualist, free markets form of a system, along with elected representation and more rights for the individual citizen, is a much more better sort of a governance and economic system. And I would definitely agree with that system. But you can still see out there, folks, a lot of people will say, even in America right now, on the left and the right. Oh, authoritarianism's great because it brings peace. Like, look at China. They have a dictatorship, but at least it's peaceful. And a lot of people use that as an argument to say all the other bads are justified because of these few goods. It's a fairly interesting sort of a thing with that. But once again, to bring this all around about, if you want to be the devil's advocate on anything, you can find an argument to support any position. Generally, though, I'm entirely not more, but entirely for a democratic form of a governance system, a capitalist and free trade form of an economic system, and a government and an economy that supports the rights of the individual over the collective, without a doubt. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to Paul Weekly, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Paul, for that 20. He said, both of your reviews and knowledge is greatly appreciated in LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying our views and information, because we get really deep in the question segment sometimes, and tonight's one of those nights. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Alan Orchard, and Alan just threw in a 20 Canadian, and thank you very much, Alan, for that support right there in the super sticker of the YouTube lemon creature. Hey! It's just having a great time there in that super sticker, but thank you very much, Alan, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say a humongous thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for making this thing possible and putting in the YouTube lemon. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than, guess who? It's going to be Robert Krogan, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Robert, as well, for that support. He said, that's an interesting aircraft in Puerto Rico. A-10 replacement, maybe?
I think it may actually be, especially for striking the narco boats, because there will never be any contested airspace around them. So you can just slam them with a Hellfire from a Hercules, and they'll probably be a lot cheaper. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, in my opinion, and a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And let's take a look at what the people wanted. The people's vote. The people's vote. What government structure do you prefer the most? 68% said personal freedoms over being hyper-effective, while 26% said hyper-effective over personal freedoms. And 6% said anarchy and a free-for-all. Those people were trying to be edgy. Honestly, anarchy and a free-for-all, that's never going to work. I threw that one in there as a fun option, but that's honestly, that leads to hell and destruction, and I think people were probably joking when they picked it, I hope. But 67% that said personal freedoms over being hyper-effective, I would say that's where I would land, certainly, because what's the point of a hyper-effective government if you don't even have the personal freedoms to enjoy the effectiveness of that government? I would say that strips away the benefit of being hyper-effective. So for the people that said they prefer a hyper-effective government over personal freedoms, the problem with that is this. When you have a hyper-effective government, typically you have to push people out of the equation because democracy slows things down dramatically. And in order for your government to be effective and hyper-effective, you have to tell the people, you need to take a back seat because we need to get things done quick to be effective. And the people's speaking and the people's mouth is slowing that down. So therefore, the people's mouth just has to shut up, basically, and the government will do what it wants to get the job done quick. And in my opinion, that's not good because that means that people are not being represented properly because in order to be heard, you have to have debates, you have to have time, and honestly, these days, I mean, we have so many debates and so much time these days, it seems like we don't get anything done. So there's got to be a limit to that too. But I'm with the 67%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm definitely with the 67% without a doubt. Hyper-effective governments are incredibly dangerous because you might end up being one of the sticks that get into the cogs that start slowing down the effectiveness, so you might have to get whacked one day by that government. That's why I'm not really a big fan of them, because that person could be anyone. It doesn't matter how important you think you are, how loyal you think you are. If there is ever a question that you start to threaten the position of the government or its effectiveness or its efficacy or efficiency, you will be killed pretty quickly or imprisoned. And so that's something I generally wouldn't want to live through. So I hope that does address that the best I can, because I'd be without a doubt in the 67%. And also, folks, I just want to make this clear, because some people never have the ability, like some, not a lot, but some people never have the ability to understand that sometimes we're just saying things as a devil's advocate. I was saying earlier that authoritarian governments have appeal to be a devil's advocate. I do not agree with authoritarian governments. I just want to make that wildly clear before someone starts yelling from the mountaintops that the Enforcer is calling for some sort of a communist or fascist dictatorship. I'm obviously not, But I am trying to point out to folks that there is a position that people can make arguments from and use some of the few benefits that you would find in a system like that to try and push for it. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Now, some type of government we've never had before is a tech oligarchy. We've never seen that throughout the entire course of history. Like this is a first for the 21st century, by the way. Never been a tech oligarchy. There was oligarchy, obviously, during the USSR, and there's currently oligarchy in the Russian Federation, but it's not based around one industry, which is technology. It's based around multiple different industries. Basically, in Russia, if you have a lot of money of any industry, then you're an oligarch. In the United States, it turns out if you have a lot of money and you have a tech company that you also run and also operate as well, you have top-notch power at that point. You control what people see. You control what people basically think because you tell people what to think because you own the companies that people are addicted to, basically. So that's a big problem. And obviously, I think we're going to be having to deal with that in the 21st century in the coming years, basically controlling that influence over the people. Because in democracy, the people are supposed to be the rulers of the government, at least in theory, or at least represented through the representatives in the government. So if the people are being subverted through their own ignorance and also manipulated by these companies, then are they really thinking on their own free will, or are they not? Are they being manipulated to think that they have free will, but actually they're being influenced by these companies and these oligarchs that are basically oligarchs is the only word for it. I was about to say something different, but I'm going too far. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that's a pretty interesting point. Also, to add to something, a great question from Beyond the Veil. They said, why do we have the option to rebel if the government can just knock us down with the military? You don't have the option to rebel. And that's something that a lot of people misunderstand because of the founding of this country. And I have to lay this out there to people because people do not know this. When the Declaration of Independence said that they had a right to stand up and fight against a tyrannical government, a lot of people do not understand this, but when they wrote that letter and sent it over to the Parliament in the United Kingdom, they did that as British subjects. They did not have a right to rebel against the British government. And if the rebellion had failed in this country, all of the founding fathers would have been rounded up, tried, and executed for inciting rebellion in the colonies. A lot of people do not understand that. And that's what would happen to people today if they tried a rebellion against the U.S. government. We don't execute people for that. We put them in prison. People always think that they have a right to rebel. Rebelling against a government is always going to be at your own risk, especially in a republic like we have, or any form of a democracy like a republic. There is really not a great argument for rebellion, especially at that point, because a republic operates under the premise that rebellions or transitions of power, like you would see in a normal dictatorship where a rebellion would have to happen for a change of power, a rebellion or a revolution is done through voting or elections. That's the idea of the republic for the large part. So someone conducting an armed rebellion, especially in the United States, it is a really crazy sort of an idea because it completely throws the idea of the republic on its head. Instead of people conducting a revolution by voting people out and voting new people in that they agree with, they're trying to conduct a revolution by, through the force of arms, overthrowing those very representatives. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't really understand when it comes to that sort of a deal, is that nobody ever has a right, even against the U.S. government, for some reason some people think that, to try and overthrow it. You always conduct a revolution at your own risk, no matter what form of government it is, and if your revolution fails, you will pay quite dearly for it, no matter what government system you have. So, that's...
Generally, though, it's not democratic to overthrow governments. Like, if some... Imagine this, folks, because I don't support that whatsoever. I don't support overthrows of democratically elected governments at all. Not even a hair of me thinks that. So it's like the people that think that that's the way to go, if they just don't like the way the government's going, we're just going to overthrow it. It's like, what? Then people could think that every time they lose an election, they could think that. They could think, oh, I don't like this. I think we're heading toward tyranny if we keep this up for the next 10 years. So let's just overthrow it. It's like, what, we're going to overthrow are the people going to overthrow the government like every 5 years because they don't like it? It's like, that's crazy talk. I don't understand the people. Those are almost like anarchists to a degree. It's like, if you don't like what's happening, the people are voting these people in. You got to solve the problem at the core of it. People are not educated on the candidates. That's problem number one. Some of the problem lies with the voters. Some of the problem lies with manipulative people taking advantage of other people and playing to their, I guess you could say, their weaknesses, and then they fool them into voting for them. So the problem lies with the people. The people are voting these people in. You can't just go say, okay, I don't like the current guy, I'm just going to go overthrow it. I don't think that's the right way at all.
And also on top of that, folks, I see some people saying some additional stuff in the chat, some interesting points. Someone said, let's see here for the first time. Really quickly to try and summarize them all and just say it this way. Some people are saying, well, no, you actually do have a right to try and overthrow the government. You do not. And especially in any sort of a democratic system like we have, you just don't. Because the idea in really any democratic system, Britain included during that period, is that if you do not like the government, the revolution is the next election. So right now, if you're talking about the presidency, the next revolution is in 2028. We had the last revolution in 2024 when everyone went out and voted and they picked their guy. And whoever wins, they're the guy. Like, there's no violence involved in the process at all. The violence has been removed through the democratic system. Everyone casts their vote. The battle is held in the votes themselves. They're counted. And whoever has the largest numbers, they have won that revolution. And that's the new government. And that's the way it is for every single position in the government. The problem, the paradox with people saying you have a right to overthrow the government is that it completely removes that peaceful revolution and that peaceful transition of power and turns it right back into what it would have been during the tribal days of the caveman clans of the Uga and the Buga, which is just to whip out the spears and the sticks and start killing each other to see who wins, which is pretty much achieving the same thing, mind you all, but not through peaceful or democratic means. But it literally does the same thing if you don't realize it. It just ends up getting a load of people killed in the process anyways. And then it leads to a bunch of tyrants taking charge.
Yeah, unfortunately, here's my hope. Here's my hope for America at this point, because in my personal opinion, and this isn't getting into partisan politics with like saying, oh, this side's right, that side's right. This is not that whatsoever. But the problem right now with America is people are treating politics like it's a football game or something. Like it's like, oh, like I like what this fool over here is saying. Like he's talking reckless, he's talking loud and crazy, and he's owning the other side. So I'm going to vote for him because I like the way he owns the other side. And they're being completely ignorant because they're not even looking at the person's policy. So, in my opinion, that's bad decision making, and those decisions affect the entire country. So, eventually, when people make enough bad decisions and they put their hand on the stove and they get burned, and they get burned bad, I'm hopefully thinking that maybe that'll teach people a lesson. Maybe when people's decisions catch up to them and they realize, oh crap, I shouldn't have elected that person because they're going to burn the country to the ground. That was a bad decision. Maybe that will humble people enough to think, I need to be really cautious about who I vote for next time. My only concern with that is, though, hopefully they don't burn the country bad enough that it destroys our entire system before they learn that lesson. That's the risk of that. But I hope we don't get to that point, though. I hope people wake up and start thinking about who they're voting for instead of just treating it like a football game.
Yeah, I would hope so. Also, I saw someone say, no, there's definitely clearly a good side and a bad side. Stop riding the fence. Which side's the good side to you? I actually am seriously asking you. I want to know, what is the good side in your opinion? Because I'll tell you this right now before you even answer. I can make you a moral grandstand to make either side sound great right here on air right now. I won't because I'll break the no politics rule. But I could sit there and make you an appeal that would be for the Democrats or the Republicans, where I make it sound like I value life, I value the citizenry, I value free speech, and all of the wonderful, great things that everyone always says to make their party sound great. And I can make it as convincing as possible for you for either side. It's a completely subjective thing, which one's right or wrong. And then you could sit there and go, well, the other side has done this and that. And then I could go and demonize the other side for you free of charge as well. It doesn't really matter which side. Just, stick me on one of them. I'll make it sound great or terrible, whatever you want. It's all subjective. It's a matter of opinion. And it doesn't matter whether you think one side's great or not. It does not give you a right to go and overthrow the government because you don't like them. That's tyranny. And that's what this country was founded to completely remove. We have representation. through our government now, thanks to the revolution. And now we are able to have a revolution every 2 years, really, whenever the midterms come around, and every 4 years when we vote for the president. And it's completely peaceful, and it's probably the best way that it's ever been done historically. I would say that there's really no other better way, honestly. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we do have to move on, folks, because we have a lot of questions to get to, and this is a great discussion, actually. I'm actually enjoying this a great deal, but we do have to make sure to get to the other questions. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Thomas D'Orazio, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Thomas, as well, for that support. He said, "Slav Ukraine, and Putin is a tired, fading dictator and LSA."
And I thank you so much for support, and long live the Lee Spring Army. He looks like a goblin these days, really. But a humongous thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Guedo, who puts in a 10. And he said, "For the move."
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. Thank you for supporting the fun for the move. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rebecca Bruce, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Rebecca, for that $10 support. And she said, "Best channel on YouTube, hands down." And thank you very much for that, by the way. They said, "Love you guys, and thanks for all the hard work, and always a great stream."
Thank you so much for the kind words and the support, and thank you for the kind words. We love to hear the kind words, and it encourages us to keep this thing running. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Mark Dixon. And thank you very much, Mark, for that 10 as well. He did not leave a comment, but we do appreciate that support very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Altered Gaming TV. And he said, "I also don't understand the Venezuela priority due to the military publicly saying that we need to triple our ammunition production due to such small reserves, and China will pounce if there's any truth to that."
And I would have to say, there's a lot involved in that. It's actually a really big rabbit hole with the whole increasing munitions production. But I would say that's a fairly interesting point to observe, though. I will say that. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, really quickly, I want to address this one. It's from the live chat. Beyond the Veil said, "The government is so far removed from what the founders intended." You're absolutely right. But I would also make a counter that that's what they intended. Because the Constitution was designed to be able to be subject to change. And also another thing that a lot of founding fathers knew is that even by their era, society, the economy, and industry were changing profoundly year over year, even by then. Like a lot of the founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, died in 1829 at the very birth of industrialism in America. And if y'all don't know, the big prevailing theory back then was agrarianism. That's what Thomas Jefferson and a lot of the founding fathers were huge into, in that land is power, and land is what an economy thrives off of. More land means more money and more prosperity. Industrialism turned that completely on its head. Someone with no land could be more prosperous than someone with lots of land if it was well developed. And so the entire system right then and there, right before their very own eyes, changed. And a lot of what you would see during that period is that a lot of understandings and culture in America changed as well. It's always been like that. Really throughout the entire time our nation has existed, you could really argue any era was completely different than what the founding fathers truly intended. But I think they understood. I think that they had the foresight and vision to know that it was going to always endlessly be changing, and that the United States should be maneuverable enough, at least in its own government system, to be able to account and maneuver around those changes successfully. Not to say that, the government system is perfect these days. It's got plenty of flaws like any other era, and we are always having to try and fight to fix those flaws. But at the same time, I think they wanted it to be able to be movable and change. Because, hell, if you even look at it, the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, that was a huge change in itself. They were already into the concept of change when it was necessary then. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, Kate Brown said the internet has ruined this country. The weird thing is it really honestly has. And the reason why it ruined, or it didn't, when I say ruined, I don't mean like the country's crap, by the way. The country's still the best one on the planet, in my personal opinion, but it's still got a lot of work that needs to be done. Like, it needs some reforms desperately. But the internet connected people, and people being way too connected is not a good thing. Like, some people are like, oh, it's better to be connected. Like, to be able to just connect to people instantly, it's better. And we have a weird relationship with this because because our entire career is based on the internet. So the way we do our reporting is through it. But at the same time, it's like the necessary evil. It runs our business, but at the same time, I recognize the dangers behind it as well. I think all at the same time, that when people are way too connected, it connects crazy people together. And not everybody's crazy, but those small percentage of people that get on the internet that are crazy and find other crazies, that leads to trouble, because those people would not have been connected with each other if it hadn't have been for the internet. And all it takes is a small percentage of crazies to band together and do something wild to cause hell in a country. That's all it takes. So I think that opened Pandora's box to a large extent, at least in my opinion. But also the internet's done good as well. Also, like for example, people are more informed. Although there's a lot of misinformation that runs around, people are generally more informed as long as they're not getting their news off of like a short video reel or something like that. So that's just what I think. But anyways, and moving on to our next one here. This one goes to traditional salmon as opposed to untraditional salmon. He puts in a 10. He said, I just turned 25 and realized y'all are slightly younger than me. Actually, I'm older than you, actually, by about a few months. He said, y'all sound like grown-ass men. Thank you. Well, I still got a tenor voice. What the hell? Did my balls not drop? LMAO. Sorry, I'm a silly goof. LOL.
They did. It's just, I don't know what it was, but we just kind of got lucky with having lower pitched voices. Don't know why. It was weird. You know, I don't really run into a lot of people with lower pitched voices, and we're always told that we sound way older than we are. But I do have to thank you so much for the compliment, the kind words, and also great to know that someone's here watching the channel that's kind of in our age bracket. You know, no disrespect to everyone else in every other age bracket. It's just good to know that younger people like us are interested in this sort of a deal. Not a lot of them are. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help us young voices to keep on air and to be able to talk our talk. Although we sound way older than we are, we're the same age as you, same generation as a matter of fact. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to traditional salmon yet again, who puts in a 10. And also, by the way, speaking of traditional salmon's last one right there, I was always told in high school, I was told by some teachers and also some of my peers as well, kind of like in a kind of like a mocking way. Some people were being genuine about it, and some people were being mocking. They said, "Oh, you ought to do voiceovers or something. You got the voice for it." I said, "Ah, that's funny." And here I am today. But anyways, the traditional salmon said in the second super chat, they said, I love these responses. And Andrew Barbaro is a bro that speaks real facts. And also Andrew Barbaro, he's got a fan here. He said, I couldn't agree more. And if you can't have an explanation to a claim, then it's probably BS.
And I thank you for the support. And I got to say, it's good to know that Andrew Barbaro has fans, because he does make solid points. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because I'd also have to say, truth is a very important thing. It's hard to seek, but once you find it, you have it forever. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sefty Roth, who puts in a 10. And they said, check out pics of Nebraska sandhills, a huge area of scenic, untouched by man, wild hills, far as the eye can see. That's 100% unique scenery in North America. And a national landmark, though, not a national park.
Nebraska sandhills. I've never heard of these before. The Nebraska sand dunes. These must be the sandhills right here. Oh! That is really cool.
Oh, that's where those people take those old cars out to and take a picture.
Wow, that is so cool. I guess, my God, y'all, it's not touched by that damned Russian thistle. This is amazing, really. I mean, thank you so much for sharing this and supporting the channel. This is actually amazing. If y'all don't know...
This is where that weed rolls through.
No, that's everywhere else. That's everywhere else. This is,
you know, like tumbleweeds.
Yeah, that's the Russian thistle.
No, not in America.
Yeah, it's a Russian thistle. It's this thing right here. This is what they look like.
Sola.
This is what they look like before they die. That's what they look like after they die, and then they start rolling around, dropping off their seeds everywhere.
This thing better register as a foreign agent.
You know what is crazy, man? Oh my, it just drives me. It's the same story as the kudzu. They brought this thing over in the 1840s because they thought it would grow easily in dry conditions and it could be feed for cattle. Turns out these things die, drop off the earth, and then a wind will blow them around, and then they drop off their seeds everywhere. The whole damn West is covered in these things, and they're invasive. So when you go and look out there at the West, none of it looks like it used to. None of it at all. Let me see if I can show y'all. a place near Utah, because they're everywhere. Like even around Utah, they're everywhere, and they're invasive, you see. Let me see. There should be yeah, the Bacchus Highway. We'll go here. All of
Oh, what the
these.
hell? Well, did you see that? It like showed like freaking what? It showed the slums for a minute. Did you see that?
Yeah, it showed like the Philippines for a split
What the hell was up with
second.
that, man? It literally like for a split second, like flashed just like bam, like it shows the slums and it jumped out here.
Bro, I was just giving you a glimpse to be grateful. Hashtag blessed.
Honestly, I was like, I thought I was like hallucinating. I was like, what the hell? Didn't you drop it down in like Nebraska or Utah or something? So what the hell is the slum doing out here?
Man, honestly, man. But if you look at this out here, every single one of these little low-lying bushes, all of them are Russian thistles. Every single one of them.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. They're all invasive. Every single one of them is an invasive species. But it's so prevalent at this point, it's so endemic to the region, there's no way to get rid of them now. It's been impossible to get rid of them since about 1875. But it's insane because, whenever you see those Wild West movies, and the tumbleweed comes rolling in, that would have never happened in most of the Wild West stories when they actually happened historically, because there were no tumbleweeds then. There were no Russian thistles in America yet.
Interesting.
Yeah, so a little bit of a fun fact for all y'all. The Wild West didn't look at all what the West looks like today because of the Russian thistle. Damn Russians screwing over our country all the way back then. But anyways, I hope that was an interesting fact for all of y'all. And I hope y'all found that very interesting. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, by the way, that's why I was so shocked about the sandhills, Matthew, is because there were no Russian thistles in the sandhills. It was what the West used to look like before the invasive species came by.
That is very interesting right there, but we
Yeah.
are running low on time.
Yes, we are. How many super chats do we have left?
A good 10.
Oh, okay. Well, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Uptown Dunk, who puts in a 10 yet again. He said, the munitions plant explosion, was it supply chain critical? And was this more likely an accident, Russia or China? Honestly, I saw the explosion, but we can't make any conclusions about it. Like, we don't know anything about it personally. It looked devastating. Like, the explosion looked huge. But to my knowledge, though, it was a place that, and correct me if I got the story wrong, anybody in the chat, because I don't know much about it, but I think it was a place that tested explosives, I think. So I don't think it would have been out of the norm for something like that to happen. Obviously, it's terrible that it happened, but it's not anything that's unexpected, I guess. I'm not sure, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, unfortunately, 19 people are missing right now. I have a feeling a lot of those are going to be announced dead here in the future, unfortunately. But I would wait for the official investigation to come out on that. And I don't think it's supply chain critical. It was a very small facility, but it's unfortunate to hear about the 19 folks who are missing. Hopefully, some of them will be found alive still, most likely in critical condition, because that building was gone by the time the explosion was over. But I would wait for the official investigation to conclude to say what exactly caused that, because it could have been anything. It could have been a myriad of issues that caused the explosion. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Game Theum, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that very, very much. We also have a 10 from Steve. And Steve said, best channel. I love the hard work and keep up the great job.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words and the support. And we love to run the channel, and thank you for wanting us to keep up the good job. We will try our best. So huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Chewbacca, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Chewbacca, for that support. They said, finally here on time, and it's my birthday weekend, and I'm Canadian. So happy Thanksgiving to my fellow Canadians. And the favorite weapon is Javelin. And what's yours?
I would say that my favorite weapon is probably the javelin as well. It's pretty cool. Me personally, me thinks it's pretty cool. But I do have to thank you for the support, and I also have to say I hope you're having a great Thanksgiving and a happy birthday to you up there in Canada. Hey! And so a big thanks to you once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Russ Rizzo. And Russ said, did you hear the Nobel Peace Prize winner address supporters at a protest against Maduro today and dedicated it to the U.S.?
I did hear that, and it's very nice to hear, because the U.S. has been supporting the Venezuelan opposition heavily against the Maduro regime. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Octavian Timorsanu, who puts into 5. And he said, I think the U.S. should focus on Europe, but I am biased. My take, the U.S. is eyeing Venezuela to prevent a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. Putin plus Xi plus Maduro equal bad.
I would have to say I definitely think we should be prioritizing Europe as our number one concern right now. I would definitely agree with that. I don't think a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0 is going to come out of Venezuela, however, just for the fact they can nuke us anyways from their own home countries because of their ICBMs. So there really isn't a purpose or a need to put nuclear weapons inside of Venezuela, and the threat assessment would end up being the same if they were in Venezuela for us or not. So a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that is addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nick, and he puts in a 5 and said, I'm interested in the opinion on if you think Ukraine would ever attack Putin's $1 billion mansion that he loves so much.
They might, but those mansions are so well defended, it actually would be a pretty tough target to hit. It's one of the few things that would be tough to hit in the whole country, actually. But a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Rendezvous, and thank you very much. He said, one must wonder if the recent Israeli strikes have anything to do with the U.S. building stronger ties with Qatar, perhaps as an act of reaffirmation. 100%. In my opinion, definitely. Bibi screwed up. He shouldn't have done that. He should not have launched that missile into Qatar. That was a big blunder right there. And I think that's part of the reason why the U.S. made an attempt to foster better relations with Qatar, because Qatar was fuming. They were angry. And we have Al Udeid Air Base there, which we cannot afford to lose. So that was a miscalculation right there on that part, and Israel overextended. But you know, like I said before, allies can make mistakes. That doesn't mean we're trying to abandon Israel or something. But at the same time, though, Israel can't just go willy-nilly launching missiles into other countries and then jeopardizing U.S. interests. That's also crossing a bit of a line there. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I remember when I said that and people were trying to burn me at the stake because I sat there and said that on the day it happened. I was like, look, like the Israelis are a great ally to have in the area, but it's not Israel at the expense of everyone else. And some people were like, how dare you say that? And it turns out that's actually what the administration was thinking as well, because it makes sense. I would have to say that the Israelis certainly did overstep with that, and so we're trying to have some reciprocity with the Qataris at the moment and try and make amends with them, because we do not want to get kicked out of such a key position in the Middle East. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Grip Van Winkled, who puts into 5. He said, my good pal awarded Order of Prince Yaroslav the Wise V-Class by President Zelensky.
Oh, wow, that's great to hear. We have to talk about Prince Yaroslav the Wise, who founded the... But beyond that, I gotta say, very nice to hear that he got such a high medal. That's actually quite an honor there. And I gotta say, a big congrats to him, and also great to hear the news. And so a big thanks to you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the alcoholist, who puts in the 5. And he said, hypothetically, if a nuclear scenario were to occur at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, what consequences would that have for Russia? And would Putin consider such a move? And LSA.
The consequences for Russia could be somewhat decent, especially within the occupied territories, but I'll be honest with you all, radioactive contamination most likely would not be as bad as a lot of people anticipate with the Chernobyl incident. It's probably going to be something closer to maybe a 3 Mile Island incident, or maybe a Chelyabinsk disaster, or Kishtim disaster, as it's more commonly known, incident with the kind of radioactive contamination. It's mostly going to be within the localized area and not far spreading, at least from what I would think right now. So the effects on Russia wouldn't be that great, but the effects on the localized area around that power plant in Ukraine would be pretty decent, especially to the town of Nikopol, which is right across the way. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Darren Quinn, who puts in a 5. And Darren said, a pity a certain someone didn't know countries in Arabia for saving them from bankruptcy, or thus our necks get stuck out.
And I thank you for the support. Unfortunately, I do not know which countries you're talking about or the particular situation. Matthew, do you know the situation that he speaks of?
I was trying to think it over. Let's see. Didn't know countries in Arabia for saving them. Oh, okay. Sadly, we can't address that one. It's actually political. I didn't pick up on that the first time I read it. It's actually a political one there.
With that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mark Andre Brunette, who puts in the 5. And Mark said, thanks for all the amazing work you guys do, and long live the LSA, and the Leaf Spring Army will never die.
And the Leaf Spring Army will never die. And long live the Leaf Spring Army, and a huge thanks to you for the support, Mark Andre Brunette. Old guard and a channel legend. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plazat.
Oh.
This one goes to Plazat, who puts in a 3. And thank you very much, Plazat, for that $3 support. And we do appreciate that, as always. And Dupper Bob put in a 2 and said, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraine, Rum Slava. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Knox Date. And Knox said, since the move into the new HQ while you guys are gone, what do you guys see happening around the world? LSA carrying the news. Let's see here. Let's list it off one by one. While we're gone on our move to the HQ, China's going to invade Taiwan. Russia's going to start a war with NATO. Venezuela is going to get attacked by the United States. Let's see here. What else is going to happen? Spain's going to be removed from NATO. The UK is probably going to descend into civil war. Let's see. What else is going to happen? Everything's going to happen while we're gone, I'm sure.
I would have to be honest with you. I think it's going to be everything. Like, it's probably going to be like every other time that we've ever been gone from the show. It's always the craziest times in human history. So I hope that addresses that the best we can. And a huge thanks to you for supporting Knox Day. Another old guard and channel legend here tonight. Nice to see you. And so a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I was joking, folks, about all that stuff. So, that's not real predictions for me. That's just jokes. Like, I'm just making the point that whatever happens when we're gone, it always gets crazy. And I hate the timing. But our next one here goes to Kamura, who puts in a 2. And it said, in what ways is Russia's massive size a hindrance?
In every way, like in every single way, logistically, economically, population-wise, service-wise, it's all a huge detriment because none of it's developed hardly. And so it takes a lot of expense to maintain those far-flung cities like Novosibirsk and Krasnoyarsk because they're in the literal middle of nowhere with a very limited supply corridor. So honestly, the whole thing's a detriment, honestly. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, a big thanks to you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And folks, that is our last super chat to address. So once again, a huge shout out to everybody tonight for helping to fund our channel and keep the operation going because it's you, the viewers, donating just like that keeps us literally here able to talk. So jumping into our live chat questions and our Morse code decoders, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, Herb Royal Fluffiness, Kush Copio Erickson Sire, and also a newcomer to the ranks, Brian Blairstown. And they said the Morse code says Maduro is getting into a straight up panic from the U.S. forces build up, LOL, LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got the dead on the nail. That's the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that thing correct. It's always an incredible and amazing feat to see the Lee Springer Signal Corps is always able to get that correct time and time again. So a huge shout out to all of y'all so much once again. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on through all of our live chat questions. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we will only be able to get 3. But I hope that we have gone through some very interesting rabbit holes, just plucking things out of the live chat at random through the super chat segment, because tonight was a very interesting and very thought-provoking sort of a night, in my opinion. I hope that a lot of y'all enjoyed it, because I was hoping that the topics we picked out were really interesting to all of y'all to speak on. And so with that, we're going to be getting 3 live chat questions here to round out the night, and then we'll be rounding out the stream. And so with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And also, by the way, we've actually answered a good bit of these live chats during our super chat segment and also during the news segment tonight. So we've actually hit a good bit of them. But getting to the ones we have not addressed so far, this one goes to Tech Gal, who said, do you think the military will take Cuba while we have all the assets required in the area? And since the U.S. wants to end Chinese influence?
I would highly doubt it. Cuba is, I don't really think we want to touch Cuba at all. I really think Cuba's off the plate at this point, simply due to a lack of any form of a political or foreign policy appetite for it, both combined, really. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Triberium. And he said, since anyone can buy stocks and bonds, is it possible the reason the stock market drops so much is due to Chinese individuals or the government of China, that is, dumping stock? And that is possible, Triberium. China does hold a good bit of U.S. bonds. So they have done that before, at least that we've heard rumors they did that before. We never got concrete proof of it. But people were alleging last time that China was dumping U.S. stocks in order to sink or at least cause the market to have a dip. So it's usually speculation. Like, there's really no way to easily prove that. Maybe someone who's well-versed in economics and finances could tell me otherwise, but I never really got any concrete proof of that last time. But it is possible, though. I'm not ruling it out. But Enforcer, what say you?
It's possible, but manipulating the stock market to lose $1.2 trillion of market cap in a day, I think that would be beyond the Chinese element of control. I just don't think they'd have that kind of money to pour into the stock market to take it out. And on top of that, until they pull that rug pull of a sense, if they hypothetically did do that, they're actually putting money into the U.S. economy and helping it to prosper in the meantime. So I don't think they would. Like, it's possible to a small degree that they may, but I don't think that they would have done it on that large scale to where it's 100% them. I would say maybe like 1 or 2% might have been them, but nowhere close to 100%. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my personal opinion. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was like the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Paul Campbell, who said, have you covered that Kazakhstan has stopped all freight from China going to Russia? Also, by the way, a real quick correction, they haven't stopped the freight. It's just simply they've ramped up really heavy inspections from what we can tell, and it's essentially put a halt to the border crossings to a large extent because the inspections are taking a long time, and it's effectively closing the border. But I don't think Kazakhstan's issued a border closure order. It's just having the similar effect because of the inspections, at least from what I can gather. I may be slightly wrong, but that's what I can gather. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I would generally agree with Enforcer Matt's assessment on that because I don't really have much more to add. You pretty much covered it well enough. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to be able to run this stream for all of y'all every single night. And I got to say that's a wonderful thing to know that so many of y'all have been here with us tonight and watched it once again. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so, y'all make sure to take it easy out there and make sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you haven't already. But with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Granny, Haram Slava, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us yet again tonight. And we will see you all again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next night of War News streaming. And also, if there is a short war video to make, I'll be making that tomorrow midday if there is enough news to cover. And hopefully there is, because I want to make short war videos every single day that I possibly can. But sadly, the last day or two, it's been impossible to make them. So hopefully I'm back to it tomorrow. So we'll have to wait and see. But with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.